With the historic first nuclear explosion in the desert sands of New Mexico in 1945, the atomic age literally exploded into being. Today, men of science continue to work in plant and field laboratories on some of the most exacting technical problems of our time. Engineering practical weapon systems around the atom's explosive power for our nation's and the free world's arsenal of defense. An arsenal which will provide a deterrent to aggression. Even more important, which will assist in the development of knowledge that will contribute to the scientific and industrial progress in peacetime applications of atomic energy. This then is the all-important task of the men of Sandia Laboratory, and this is their story.
My name is Edgar Fouche. I'm here to speak about secret government technology, reverse engineering of alien artifacts. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called the magnetic field disruptor, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. It's far ahead of anything you've ever imagined as far as technology. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed a reverse engineered MFD, and I believe the government will go at any lengths to protect this technology.
The primary focus of my channel is investigating UFO Legacy Program operations. Deep Sixth carve out special access, unacknowledged special access, or controlled access programs housed within the United States Department of Defense and/or intelligence community, focused on the recovery, reverse engineering, and exploitation of exotic technologies of unknown origin. On this channel, we've investigated several elements of the United States Defense Industrial Base, allegedly involved in clandestine UFO research, development, test, and evaluation. These include, but are not limited to, Defense Industrial Base Major Range and Test Facility Bases, or MRTFBs, such as Dugway Proving Grounds, West Desert Test Center, the Edwards 412th Test Wing, and the Naval Warfare Center Weapons Division housed at China Lake. Department of Defense prime contractors I'm willing to bet you are all familiar with: Lockheed Martin, SAIC, and Northrop Grumman. And finally, federally funded research and development centers, or FFRDCs, such as the MITRE Corporation, the Aerospace Corporation, and a network of Department of Energy-sponsored national laboratories. Whether it be discussion of which defense contractors have engaged in recovered UFO storage and material exploitation taking place in the United States Congress.
Who are the contractors that have this material, the corporations?
Well, one of them is Lockheed. And I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not saying Lockheed's the bad guys. They're doing what they were asked to do.
Sure.
They have lied about this because that's what they're supposed to do. But Lockheed would be one. There's a list I can give you, Congressman. Some of the big ones, the usual suspects.
To truly groundbreaking news segments featuring American heroes discussing their knowledge on UFO Legacy Program operations.
So the reason for the secrecy exactly is what?
Feudalistic dominance, who can have both asymmetric technology for, it seems like, just fueling the war machine.
Even to the infamous claims of UFO reverse engineering that have echoed throughout UFO lore for decades.
When I finally did get around to making a copy of this original drawing in the form of blueprint, I sent a copy to Brad. And one of the first things that he said to me on the phone was, and he wasn't kidding when he said this, he said, you know, Mark, he says, this drawing is about as accurate as you can get. He says, every detail, every aspect of it is right on the money. He said, it is so accurate in every way. He says, this has to be probably one of the most dangerous illustrations you've ever done in your life. And he says, and if you're smart, he says, you'll tear up the original, you'll throw it away, and you'll never talk about it again.
There is always, in my opinion, a critical component missing from these discussions that help form a more clear and concise picture. for the structure, workings, and involved entities in UFO Legacy Program operations. This missing topic, FFRDCs. From my research, these government-owned, contractor-operated organizations serve as the missing link in any discussion of UFO programs hidden within special access projects, serving as subject matter experts and R&D aces that operate between the U.S. Department of Defense/intelligence community and defense industrial base contractors. And today, we narrow in on one federally funded research and development center that is a reoccurring entity in all of my videos over any other: the world-famous Sandia National Laboratories. Born from Los Alamos National Lab's Z Division during the Manhattan Project, Sandia evolved into one of 3 multi-session research and development laboratories of the Department of Energy's semi-autonomous agency, the NNSA, or National Nuclear Security Administration, tasked with the primary goal of not just nuclear weapons development and management programs, but also the advancement of U.S. national security through RDT&E of extraordinary, emerging, and exotic technologies. Sandia's more alleged exotic missions have been discussed on this channel in at least half a dozen of my investigations. Whether it be accusations to aiding in the development of alien reproduction vehicle propulsion systems such as TR-3B, to comprising the on-site scientific team, aka NEST, or Nuclear Emergency Support Team, encountered by USMC Lance Corporal Jonathan Weygandt during a 1997 UFO crash retrieval in the jungles of Peru, to engaging in 1940s UFO retrievals in the disputed Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit documents. The FFRDC and Department of Energy National Lab, that is Sandia, always finds a way into any of my thorough investigations of UFO legacy programs. So today, we shall analyze Sandia National Labs in its entirety, retreading these accusations above and all prior discussion of Sandia in my work, discuss why Sandia and FFRDCs in particular are so integral to UFO RDT&E programs, investigate Sandia's work on the famed Nevada test site and tie this rich history to UFO legacy programs, study mechanisms Sandia may use to obfuscate UFO materials, and so much more. So just how deep does this rabbit hole go? Is Sandia really one of the most critical yet overlooked entities in all of UFO legacy program investigation? Well, join me today as we try and find out.
This is the Sandia story.
The Sandia National Laboratories of today, a premier federally funded research and development center and Department of Energy Research and Development Lab, with principal sites in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Kirtland Air Force Base in Livermore, California, and other significant sites at Tonopah Test Range, Hawaii, and myriad Nevada test site locations, has operated for over 75 years within the United States' most classified and innovative national security and nuclear programs. Sandia National Labs is easily most famous for its critical role played in early nuclear weapons research and development during World War II and the Cold War. These include supporting underground, atmospheric, and ground-level nuclear tests at the Nevada test site and legendary nuclear tests outside the continental United States, such as Operation Starfish Prime and Operation Castle. But Sandia doesn't specialize solely in nuclear national security. For Sandia's 75th birthday, the site detailed 75 science-based technologies developed by Sandia to support U.S. national security. These include fielding payloads and ground processing systems for 23 Defense Support Program or DSP satellites and 51 global positioning satellites. Innovations in quantum computing technology platforms, nuclear weapon deterrence and security, development of critical systems for the U.S. Hypersonic Weapons Program, design and implementation of asteroid tracking systems, breakthrough extensions of nuclear weapon lifespans, construction of the Integrated Correlation and Display System to monitor nuclear detonations in space or atmosphere, and so much more. Sandia's expertise in national security-based science and technology programs sees the National Lab deeply embedded within the Department of Energy's most secretive carve-out special access programs. And in my opinion, there is a preponderance of evidence to show Sandia has, since its very inception, operated as one of the most critical institutions engaged with deep sixth clandestine UFO Legacy Program operations.
First of it, obviously, it's understanding the situation, right? What do we have our hands on? And like I've said in some other videos and stuff, that we took the Manhattan Project secrecy and overlaid it on this issue because that secrecy worked well for atomic bomb developments and whatnots. And certainly this whole program in a nutshell, if I were to summarize the 90 plus years of history, it is a reverse engineering program to garner some kind of insight. And of course, not a lot of the things that we've learned from it are directly, ripped off the technology we found, but it has inspired other innovations that made its way into other U.S. classified programs over the year for national defense reasons, and it's a myriad of different things.
Later in this project, we will actually outline various security control mechanisms in top cover that I believe the DOE/NNSA and Sandia operate under to maintain secrecy and strict need-to-know access around UFO RDT&E programs. And this, of course, is a section for later. But as a DOE/NNSA national laboratory and government-owned FFRDC, Sandia's personnel with need-to-know access, high clearances such as Q plus SCI, and access to special nuclear information, which David Grush has actually said on Joe Rogan is used to misclassify UFO materials, engage with the most secretive DOE special access programs born from the 1954 Atomic Energy Act. Indeed, later in this video, I will theorize the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, or OICI, or DOE INT as I like to call them. And yes, the Department of Energy contains its own intelligence agency, believe it or not. Leverages creative classifications such as special nuclear materials and non-contract FII, or foreign intelligence information not releasable to contractors/consultants, not only to maintain UFO Legacy Program secrecy, but also to serve as a secure vessel to share programs, personnel, materials, and possibly recovered biologics and craft to national lab FFRDCs like Sandia. The reach of scope of Sandia is so vast, the premier DoD National Lab has worked alongside many of the corporation's major range and test facility bases and defense industrial base locations and elements I've accused on this channel of being involved in UFO programs. These include ownership of Sandia being passed between AT&T, yeah, possibly your current cellular provider, Lockheed Martin, and Honeywell. Bizarre contracts with defense industrial base locations, like this Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane, Indiana contract for $228 million for quote-unquote IT consolidation. Direct accusations of DARPA-directed SAPs focused on non-human material exploitation at the Nevada test site in the Nevada Test and Training Range. Intimate ties between Sandia and DOE National Nuclear Security Agency organizations, I believe, operate as on-site units for UFO crash retrievals, including NEST, SRT, and Office of Secure Transportation. intriguing relationships between Sandia and DoD agencies that have largely until now stayed in the shadows of UFO Legacy Program discussion, such as the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and so much more. And yeah, guys, we will discuss all of these points and many more throughout our journey today. But to truly understand Sandia and its frankly exhausting mentions alongside UFO study, retrieval, and exploitation programs, we must first step all the way back to World War II and analyze the birth and evolution of Sandia.
This then is the all-important task of the men of Sandia Laboratory, and this is their story.
Shortly before the end of World War II, 12 July 1945 to be exact, the same week as the infamous Trinity nuclear bomb test, the first ever detonation of a nuclear weapon, the newly established Z Division out of Los Alamos, the forerunner of Sandia National Labs, selected Sandia Base as an operational location. The Manhattan Project, the United States' highly compartmentalized research and development program to produce the world's first nuclear weapons during World War II, saw its weapons development portion located at the Los Alamos lab under direction of the complicated J. Robert Oppenheimer. And the Z Division served as the ordnance design, testing, and assembly arm of Los Alamos National Laboratory. Sandia Base was chosen by Los Alamos Z Division to reside at the Albuquerque Army Airfield, located less than 60 miles south of Los Alamos' principal campus. Albuquerque Army Airfield would eventually become Kirtland Air Force Base, and to this day, Sandia's primary installation in Albuquerque, New Mexico sits on Kirtland. Shortly following Allied victory in World War II, Los Alamos Z Division at Sandia Base began post-war nuclear tests, serving as a principal DoD nuclear weapons installation. 1947 proved to be a critical year for the fledgling Sandia. By the first day of 1947, Z Division, its lands, facilities, and equipment were transferred to Atomic Energy Control, the precursor to the Department of Energy, and a commission likely integral to establishing UFO Legacy Program gatekeeping structures. And again, we'll touch on this much more throughout this project. However, Sandia Base itself remained a U.S. Army base. This sort of relationship is commonplace with Sandia and DoD installations and sort of serves as an understanding for how FFRDCs would evolve and operate. Indeed, within the same month, January of 1947, 29 January to be exact, Secretary of War Robert P. Pattinson and Secretary of the Navy original accused MJ-12 member and likely murder victim James V. Forrestal established the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, or AFSWP, a joint Army and Navy venture to manage nuclear weapons. AFSWP and Los Alamos Z Division established operations at where else but Sandia Base. A subsidiary location to Sandia Base began construction in 1947 known as Manzano Base or Site Able, a top-secret project by the aforementioned AFSWP. The primary acknowledged function of Site Able was to store nuclear weapons. During the course of today's investigation, we will talk a fair bit about deep underground military bases. Thus, it is important to mention the Manzano storage area here attached to Sandia houses not one but two underground installations. Finally, on 13 May 1949, President Harry Truman urged Leroy Wilson, president of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, yes, AT&T, whose very network you may be using to watch this video right now, to manage Sandia Laboratory as a separate entity from Z Division. In Truman's words to Wilson, quote, "In my opinion, you have here an opportunity to render an exceptional service in the national interest," end quote. By 1 November 1949, Sandia Corporation, a wholly owned subsidiary of Western Electric, which was itself a subsidiary of AT&T, began management of Sandia Laboratory for the Atomic Energy Commission. Under AT&T, Sandia's operations were modeled after the infamous Bell Labs, a joint R&D subsidiary by AT&T and Western Electric, and yeah, I know, a lot of complicated corporate relationships.
And now that we've explained what we do, I think we should show how we fit into the big picture. How we're backed up by AT&T, Western Electric, and the Bell Lab.
The mid to late 1940s would see the young Sandia Corporation and Sandia Laboratory largely become the Sandia we know today. An American Southwest-based multi-mission laboratory focused on the primary goal of advancing U.S. national security. In just 4 years, spanning 1945 to 1949, from Sandia beginning as Z Division to Sandia Laboratory being managed by the Sandia Corporation, believe it or not, we already have quite a bit to cover in regards to UFO Legacy Program operations. So let's take a quick step back here before continuing down the timeline of the evolving Sandia.
Perhaps I should mention that at an organization like Sandia, you just don't saunter in and go to work. It isn't that the people are unfriendly. Actually, they bend over backward to make you feel at home. It's the need for security. You see, most of the work here is highly classified, and each employee, regardless of the type of work he does, must have an AEC security clearance. Take this badge, for instance. It's more than just a piece of plastic. To me, it's a sign of trust, and as I clipped it onto my lapel, I finally knew for sure that I belonged.
Since Sandia's very inception as Z Division, the DOE National Lab has been implicated in UFO Legacy Program operations. Let's look back to 2004, 12 to 14 November to be exact, to the second annual UFO Crash Retrieval Conference proceedings. That was presented by fantastic Majestic 12 researchers Ryan and the late Dr. Robert Wood. Let's analyze a written statement presented by former New Mexico State Representative J. Andrew Kissner. Kissner constructed this statement in 1994 after years of private interviews with first-hand UFO Legacy Program personnel. These included employees at White Sands Proving Ground, the Naval Research Laboratory, Atomic Energy Commission Labs, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, Sandia, etc. Former high-ranking military officers, defense industrial base contractors, and the Office of Naval Research. And the subject of these interviews, well, crashed extraterrestrial discs retrieved in Roswell and White Sands, New Mexico in 1947. And the title of this statement, quote, "Peculiar Phenomenon, Early United States Efforts to Collect and Analyze Flying Discs," end quote. With his investigation and interviews of UFO Legacy Program personnel, Kissner almost sounds like a 1994 precursor to David Grush in a way, does he not? And I must say here, as we dive into Kissner's actual disclosures, his statements were presented at the UFO Crash Retrieval Second Annual Conference by Linda Moulton Howe, who is, let's just say, an unreliable source at best. So I actually contacted Kissner myself and can confirm these statements. Kissner's sources detail the series of events beginning 15 May 1947 that led to elements of the United States Army offensively acting and downing 2 to 4 quote-unquote flying discs. One of these incidents being the infamous Roswell event. According to these sources, flying discs may in fact have contributed to the deaths of several U.S. servicemen from 9 May to 31 July 1947. And thus, the quote-unquote special weapons aboard flying discs were immediately defined and classified as, quote, enemy weapons systems, end quote. Perhaps this instant classification of some UFO tech as weapon systems carries on to this day. As in the 2010s, former U.S. Army Green Beret Randy Anderson claimed to visit the Off-World Technologies Division at the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane in Indiana, where he was informed a gauntlet-like piece of technology was considered a weapon system due to the item performing an energetic discharge during recovery. These discs, according to Kissner sources, were processed and analyzed for Dr. Vannevar Bush, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's Joint Research and Development Board and director of the Office of Scientific Research and Development. Now, stop me if you've heard this before. I have an entire 2.5-hour video on the contentious March 1948 Aztec, New Mexico UFO crash. One of the most foundational pieces to that case is the involvement of Vannevar Bush, not only as an on-site retrieval member and Majestic 12 member, but as the man under which all recovery, transportation, and exploitation efforts were conducted on the 99.9-foot diameter crashed disk. Additionally, former student of Einstein, consultant to Bush's Research and Development Board, and physicist lost to time, Dr. Robert Sarbacher would in 1950 inform Canadian radio engineer Wilbert B. Smith that flying saucers existed and that the matter was classified even higher than the H-bomb. But concentrated efforts to study the craft were being conducted by Vannevar Bush. I could spend another 2 hours discussing Bush, Sarbacher, Aztec, and early retrieval operations, but that is not our focus today. So if you want to learn more here, go check out my Aztec project. According to Kissner's statement, alongside Vannevar Bush, efforts to process and analyze the disks were aided by the Atomic Energy Commission's Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory and its Z Division at Sandia Base. These efforts were allegedly supported by military groups, such as Air Material Command and personnel stationed at the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project at Sandia Base. Recall the AFSWP as a joint venture featuring James V. Forrestal, an alleged original Majestic 12 member alongside Vannevar Bush. According to Kissner's statement, further analytical efforts on the recovered disks were supported by staff members of the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism, which is a weird connection to Aztec. Dr. Detlev Bronk, with weird connections to Aztec and Majestic 12. Personnel from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, and finally, the RAND Corporation, which is another FFRDC I often implicate in UFO Legacy Programs. Additionally, according to Kissner's sources, under classified presidential executive order in 1948, custody of the recovered disks were apparently vested in civilian authorities. These civilian authorities in question, the Atomic Energy Commission-owned contractor-operated national labs, like Los Alamos and the soon-to-be separate entity Sandia, requested by President Truman himself. These precursor FFRDCs with complete custody of recovered crafts were assisted by Air Force Systems Command, or SYSCOM, Naval Research Lab, and the Research and Development Board, according to Kissner's sources. All institutions I've accused of participating in UFO Legacy Programs. This alleged program structure saw precursor FFRDCs like Los Alamos, Sandia, Oak Ridge, and Lawrence Livermore gained custody of recovered non-human disks that saw scientific inquiry support by Bush's Research and Development Board, military support by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and program coordination by the newly formed in 1947 National Security Council. With so much talk of Vannevar Bush with his Research and Development Board, Joint Research and Development Board, and Office of Scientific Research and Development, really serving as the first critical and senior UFO Legacy Program member, perhaps then it is comical that from 1947 to 1962, Bush additionally served on the board of directors for the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, who, with their subsidiary Western Electric, was the first organization to manage the young Sandia. Kissner's statement has many more interesting avenues to cover, such as how critical elements of the lash-up radar network meant to protect from Soviet bomber attacks that was stationed at White Sands, Los Alamos, Sandia Base, and the 767 AC&W radar site could have possibly been set up to track UFOs. And of course, in the Aztec crash story, these triangulated radar sites were thought to have interfered with and brought down the manned non-human disk. Now, I know radars bringing down craft is very, very, very bizarre. However, viewers of my channel will recall, as recently as my project on SAIC, that I frequently discuss how Ronald Reagan's 1983 Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI, built to protect the United States from Soviet ICBMs, actually secretly engaged in highly compartmentalized, deep-sixed UFO Legacy Program operations, some of which harnessed SDI's lethality and target hardening or particle beam weapons programs to offensively target UFOs with microwave or possibly X-ray weaponry. I discussed there how SAIC would likely have been the prime contractor aiding the SDI in shooting down non-human craft. Quite the interesting connection here. Possibly these weapons against UFOs were accidentally discovered during the late 1940s. For now, Kissner's statement regarding Roswell, UFO crash retrievals, Sandia, and UFO Legacy Program structure serves as intriguing data to evaluate in our investigation. And I would be very much interested in getting Kissner on record in an interview to discuss his findings. But for now, we move on, but not before one more intriguing footnote. Kissner would share his statement and findings with fellow New Mexico State Representative Stephen Schiff. Schiff would immediately initiate a General Accounting Office probe to, quote, determine if the U.S. Air Force or any other U.S. government agency possessed information on the alleged crash and recovery of an extraterrestrial vehicle and its alien occupants near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947, end quote. On 28 July 1995, Schiff released the GAO report detailing the results of a records audit relating to events surrounding 1947's Roswell and the U.S. military response. Schiff stated important documents which could shed light on Roswell were missing, stating, quote, the GAO report states the outgoing messages from Roswell Army Airfield for this period of time were destroyed without proper authority, end quote. Schiff pointed attention to the fact the GAO estimated the documents were destroyed over 40 years ago and would also state, quote, it is my understanding that these outgoing messages were permanent records, which never should have been destroyed. The GAO could not identify who destroyed the messages or why, end quote. This investigation actually led to 1997's infamous The Roswell Report case closed, which saw the U.S. Air Force poorly attempt to debunk Roswell as a Project Mogul balloon. And actually, maybe we'll dive into another second quick footnote regarding Kissner. Kissner's discoveries regarding Sandia Base, Z Division, and early UFO Legacy Program operations actually have quite a bit of similarities to a number of the Majestic 12 documents. Now, I'm sure everyone here has heard of Majestic 12, or the MAG 12, but if you have not, this group of legend was established allegedly in 1947, with some of the United States' brightest scientific and military minds, including Dr. Vannevar Bush, Secretary James Forrestal, General Nathan Twining, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, and more. The Majestic documents saw a wide swath of quote-unquote leaks that varied tremendously in credibility during the 1980s and 1990s. The Majestic documents are worth referencing here, but should not be taken as a concrete source of confirmation or evidence, seen as while I am quite confident a group called MAG 12 did indeed exist, it is wildly difficult to establish which majestic documents are fact, hoaxes, or passage material. And yes, I do think some majestic documents were indeed passage material. To learn more about the web of complexity that is Majestic 12, I recommend watching my project with the best Majestic 12 researcher in the entire world, Ryan Wood. The first ever Majestic 12 document to quote-unquote leak is one that I consider rather credible. This document, allegedly dated 18 November 1952, titled Briefing Document Operation Majestic 12, served to brief incumbent President Dwight D. Eisenhower on MAJ 12 operations.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime.
The Eisenhower Briefing Document, or EBD as we'll call it, contains some rather interesting parallels to known events, such as the EBD containing a memorandum for SecDef James Forrestal from President Harry Truman dated 24 September 1947, which discussed authorization for Forrestal and Vannevar Bush to proceed with Operation Majestic 12. Of course, in real life, Truman, Forrestal, and Bush did indeed meet on 24 September 1947. We can find other similar intriguing parallels around the death of Secretary Forrestal, who allegedly threw himself out of a naval hospital window on 22 May 1949. The EBD discussed General Walter B. Smith being appointed as Forrestal's replacement in the MAJ 12 on 1 August 1950. And of course, in Truman's own daily appointments on 1 August 1950, we can find an off-record meeting with General Walter Bedell Smith. The EBD makes reference to a UFO crash retrieval that occurred in the El Indio Guerrero region of Texas on 6 December 1950. This case is super convoluted, and many actually mistake this crash retrieval with the 1955 Robert Willingham Del Rio, Texas crash case. The EBD states recovered materials were transported to the Atomic Energy Facility at Sandia for study. Recall how Kissner sources also discussed how UFO materials were placed under custody of labs that would ultimately become FFRDCs like Sandia. We can also take a look now to the enigmatic and highly contentious Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit documents. I covered the IPU, a U.S. Department of Counterintelligence in-house project, whose record was kept only through institutional memory and proved to exist through FOIA to researchers like William Steinman in my Aztec video. There is so much to discuss regarding the IPU, but I recommend checking out that video for history on, validation for, and arguments against the IPU, and really in-depth discussion of two alleged documents quote-unquote leaked alongside the Majestic documents. I do want to take a quick look at the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit report, dated July 1947, given to UFO researcher Timothy Cooper from the enigmatic Thomas Cantwell personally in July of 1995. This intelligence assessment references recovery of multiple fallen objects from 4 to 6 July 1947 in the state of New Mexico, aka the Roswell crash and possibly other retrieval operations. The IPU report details a UFO recovery operation in which a special radiobiological team accompanied by a special engineering detachment, or SED, a term used to describe a group of technical personnel assigned to the Manhattan Project, as well as a security detail from Sandia Base under orders from Colonel Sherman V. Hasbrook of the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project. Sandia and the AFSWP secured the immediate area surrounding the crash site. Recall now for the second time the AFSWP operating at Sandia Base being implicated in UFO Legacy Program operations in the disclosures of J. Andrew Kissner. And it's worth noting, Kissner likely could not have gotten his information from the IPU docs, as Kissner's statements regarding UFO Legacy Programs were completed in 1994 after years of interviews. whilst the IPU documents were released in the year of 1995. So if anything, there's a possibility that the IPU docs actually ripped off Kissner's disclosures. As it turns out, Colonel Sherman V. Hasbrouck was indeed a very real Army colonel, who even served as a high-ranking member in post-World War II nuclear weapons programs, and worked closely with Leslie Groves, a famous U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officer who oversaw the construction of the Pentagon and directed the Manhattan Project. And Hasbrouck did indeed aid in fleshing out the AFSWP. And yes, as Brigadier General, we can absolutely place Hasbrouck at Sandia. Keep the AFSWP in mind, as later in this project we will discuss AFSWP again and how it actually connects to the testimony of Dylan Borland. But that's not all we have to work with here regarding IPU and Sandia. In fact, things here get even stranger. Within the IPU report, mention is made that all civilian and military personnel involved with UFO recovery operations contained strict need-to-know access with extensive security clearances. And those who got close to the crash site, well, the toll they suffered was severe. According to the report, multiple MPs suffered nervous breakdowns, and 3 technicians from Sandia died due to some sort of ambiguous contamination. This, of course, reminds me of the 1974 Coyame, Mexico crash retrieval, in which, allegedly, a Mexican military recovery team was killed by contamination from a containment breach in the hull of a recovered UFO. Though I think it is far more likely the American recovery team in that case killed those soldiers, but that is not important to our investigation. Yet outside of allegations of Z Division and Sandia Base performing critical roles in UFO Legacy Program operations, we do have some very tangible lines of research to pursue. In February of 1952, just 1 month before the creation of Air Force Project Blue Book, a study of UFOs many liken to the modern-day All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, as a systematic tool to debunk the subject of UFOs. The Air Force actually suggested one Project Twinkle not be declassified, due to the subject matter of the project not being able to be debunked by natural phenomena. What was Project Twinkle? Well, of course, it was a study that analyzed UFOs, specifically green fireballs, at the Atomic Energy Commission's Los Alamos National Lab, White Sands Proving Ground, Holloman Air Force Base, and Sandia Base. Twinkle personnel all hailed from Los Alamos Astrophysical Association and consisted of scientists and engineers with Atomic Energy Commission/Air Force security clearances. Thus, it is intriguing to me when Twinkle astronomers such as Lincoln LaPaz argued such anomalous sightings that performed bizarre maneuvers and would turn on and off its lights could not be a standard meteor. But lastly, before we continue the timeline of Sandia, I do want to revisit Sandia's managing entity, when in 1949, Sandia Base became the Sandia we all know and possibly love today. Upon its inception, Sandia Lab became managed by the Sandia Corporation, a subsidiary of Western Electric, and Western Electric was, of course, a subsidiary of American Telephone and Telegraph. AT&T ultimately modeled operations at Sandia after Bell Labs, a joint-owned R&D subsidiary of AT&T and Western Electric. This sort of complicated FFRDC ownership structure is extremely prevalent today, such as Battelle Memorial Institute creating numerous subsidiaries like UT Battelle LLC to manage Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Battelle forming Triad National Security LLC, comprising Battelle Memorial Institute and 2 university systems to manage Los Alamos National Labs. And of course, this trend is prevalent in Sandia, as I have discussed and will discuss more in this project. From 1993, when management of the Sandia Corporation was passed onto Martin Marietta, up until the modern day, Sandia Corporation and Sandia National Labs has experienced a slew of management by subsidiaries. This includes Martin Marietta and Lockheed Martin from 1993 to 2017, as well as a Honeywell subsidiary from 2017 to present. This Honeywell subsidiary created to administrate Sandia National Labs is called the National Technology and Engineering Solutions of Sandia, LLC. Early operations at Sandia, being modeled after AT&T and Western Electric's own Bell Labs, is well worth quickly referencing as well. Under AT&T from 1925 to 1996, Bell Labs was credited with some of the most innovative developments in human history: radio astronomy, several programming languages, the photovoltaic cell, the laser, and the transistor. 11 Nobel Prizes and 5 Turing Awards were awarded to Bell Labs in this time. Bell Labs is also a critical component of the testimony of the divisive Colonel Philip J. Corso, head of the U.S. Army, not to be confused with the infamous Air Force's Foreign Technology Division in the early 1960s. In his manuscript and several interviews given in 1997, shortly before his death, Corso stated the modus operandi of the Army's Foreign Technology Division under Corso and the legendary General Arthur Trudeau was to seed recovered non-human technology from several UFO crash retrievals in the late 1940s into American industry to bolster the U.S. war machine and, if necessary and applicable, help the American people. The goals of the Foreign Technology Division, with Corso's claimed $2 billion annual operating budget, or roughly $10.5 billion today, was national security of the United States and protection of the American way of life. Now, quickly to mention, Corso's bestseller, The Day After Roswell, co-written by Bill Burns, contains a mountain of added fluff, such as Corso inferring he was present at the 1947 Roswell crash. The book is really a far cry from Corso's actual manuscript titled Dawn of a New Age and a few published interviews. The Day After Roswell is infamous for claiming numerous technologies that had clear technological development trees were actually reverse-engineered from non-human technologies, including the transistor, fiber optics, and more. Corso's manuscript, however, claims non-human technology was not so different from our own in these crashes, and that these technologies were actually leveraged to aid in the maturing of existing human technologies developed or that were in development. The largest contractor accused by Corso, Bell Labs. Interesting then how Sandia was modeled after Bell Labs, which would allegedly go on to serve as the U.S. Army's premier contractor for UFO material exploitation programs. But let's finally get back on track to the evolution of Sandia to discuss how the premier FFRDC of today implicated in UFO legacy programs came to be. Sandia, under direction of Western Electric and its parent AT&T, thrived, opening up a second site in California's Livermore Valley in 1956, right next to Lawrence Livermore National Labs, another Department of Energy NNSA National Lab FFRDC. By 8 February 1957, Sandia conducted its first test drop at the Tonopah Test Range north of the Nevada test site.
We also have 2 ballistic ranges. One is near the old silver mining town of Tonopah, Nevada.
Tonopah is a highly classified DOE weapons testing range I recently accused of engaging in clandestine UFO RDT&E. And Tonopah served as the third principal location for Sandia. And sit tight, because we will have a massive section on Sandia's operations at the Nevada Test and Training Range and Nevada Test Site coming here soon. Sandia's successful nuclear stockpile surveillance and scientific prowess was on full display by the early 1960s, with Sandia developing the PAL, or Permissive Action Link, an access control security device for nuclear weapons, which was required for use by all NATO allies under Presidential Security Action Memorandum No. 160, signed by JFK in 1962. That same year of '62, 7 December to be specific, President John F. Kennedy Jr. visited Sandia's New Mexico site, where he received a briefing on the lab's technical programs and toured the weapons training program. By 1971, Sandia Base, home of Sandia in Albuquerque, New Mexico, merged into Kirtland Air Force Base, where Sandia National Labs is located to this day. Like everything connected to Sandia, Kirtland is not without bizarre ties to UFOs. For example, the contentious Majestic 12 Special Operations Manual was allegedly taken from Kirtland Air Force Base Building 21, Unit KB-88. And while we're here, disgraced former Aero Deputy Director Tim Phillips seems rather fond of this Special Operations Manual, or SOM 101, discussing that Aero came across the document during his official duties.
Now, we did find a very, very well-written, period correct, as far as the style, the font, the paper, a plan going back to the 1940s that was designed for the Department of Defense to respond to a UFO incident.
However, Phillips couldn't keep his story straight around this document. In his podcast with Event Horizon, Phillips discussed how the bound document Aero happened upon did not contain images or diagrams when discussing UFO material packaging procedures. However, and this was off-air, Phillips would tell podcasters the bound document was chock full of diagrams and images. Outside of SOM 101, Kirtland of course housed AFOSI Counterintelligence Officer Rick Doty, who was indeed stationed at Kirtland whilst conducting a complex disinformation campaign against Paul Benowitz. And finally, by 1979, the United States Congress officially labeled Sandia Laboratories as a Department of Energy FFRDC under the, quote, Department of Energy National Security and Military Applications of Nuclear Energy Authorization Act of 1980, end quote. In 1993, management contracts for Sandia were acquired by Martin Marietta, one half pre-merge to the largest defense industrial base contractor in the entire world, Lockheed Martin. When Lockheed Corporation and Martin Marietta merged in 1995, the newly formed Lockheed Martin would continue to manage Sandia National Labs through the Sandia Corporation up until 2017. This relationship between Sandia and Lockheed was a massive focus of my Lockheed Martin UFO Legacy Programs video, especially quote-unquote exotic programs at Sandia's second principal site, the Tonopah Test Range, located in the Nevada Test and Training Range. And again, sit tight because gosh, do I have some interesting topics to dive into regarding Sandia and the Nevada Test Site. From 2017 to the present day, Sandia acquired a new administrator, and this was called the National Technology and Engineering Solutions of Sandia LLC, a subsidiary of Honeywell International. And to bring up Honeywell again, Honeywell is an American publicly traded multinational conglomerate with one of 4 major areas of business focused on aerospace. And Honeywell is a contractor that I firmly believe engages with UFO legacy programs. But what intrigues me here is the former aerospace defense, electronics, and information technology contractor named Sperry Rand, that Colonel Philip J. Corso claimed was integral to the Foreign Technology Division's efforts to exploit non-human materials. Sperry Rand went defunct in 1986, and its former divisions became part of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Honeywell. In the modern day, Sandia, based out of their Albuquerque, New Mexico site, sharing land with Kirtland Air Force Base, additionally operates secondary sites in Livermore, California, Tonopah, Nevada, Shoreview, Minnesota, and Kauai, Hawaii. Sandia, New Mexico operates in 5 acknowledged technical areas. TA-1, which focuses on the design, R&D, and limited production of weapon systems and energy programs. TA-2, which is a 45-acre facility established in 1948 for assembly of chemical high-explosive main charges for nuclear weapons, which later evolved into a site focused on nuclear weapon assembly. TA-3, which features extensive design test facilities. TA-4, which houses several internal confinement fusion research and pulsed power facilities. And finally, TA-5, that houses 2 research facilities, an intense gamma irradiation facility, and the hot cell factory. Outside of the 5 technical areas, Sandia also conducts mysterious operations on the Coyote Test Field. Many structures in the Coyote Test Field, encompassing around 11 square miles of land, were actually built in the late 1940s under the AFSWP. Whether it be the 5 technical areas in the New Mexico headquarters, work on the Nuclear National Security Site, aka the former Nevada test site, the Livermore installation, or other covert presences, I believe Sandia conducts UFO Legacy Program operations and likely houses UFO program hardware, materials, data, documents, etc. at myriad Sandia SAP-Fs or SAP facilities and secure locations. Whether it be the Avery area at Dugway, SAIC under NSWC Crane, or Bechtel building DUMS with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I always believe it is interesting and well worth analyzing who builds, operates, and maintains alleged UFO Legacy Program sites. This is why I am particularly intrigued in a small, Florida-based architectural and interior design firm that I have stumbled upon in my research called More2 Design. Don't let More2 Design's happy-go-lucky logos and fonts fool you. More2's technical projects are impressive to say the least. The firm has completed technical work for a minimum of 8 Sandia Labs, warehouses, and facilities, including, quote, Instrumentation Materials Research Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratory, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Nuclear Safeguards Laboratory, Sandia Base, New Mexico, and Simulation Technology Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratory, Albuquerque, New Mexico, end quote. Outside of specifically Sandia, the firm has completed work for many sites, likely Sandia-related, within Albuquerque and Kirtland Air Force Base, and these include a Systems Research Lab, Environmental Sciences Lab, and even work for Sandia Corporation's manager, Honeywell, in the appropriately named Sperry Flight Systems. Now, you may have noticed some completed facilities here are listed under Sandia Base. And remember, Sandia Base operated Los Alamos' Z Division, and this transitioned to Sandia Laboratory around 1949. And why is this? Well, this is because More2 Design was co-founded by one of the current owner's father, Jason Moore, in 1947 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was the architectural firm Flatow and Moore, started by Max Flatow and Jason Moore in 1947, that designed many public and technical buildings throughout New Mexico and the western United States. One half of Flatow and Moore, Max Flatow, served as a first lieutenant in World War II in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, designing military installations. Before the start of the firm, Flatow moved to the secret city of Los Alamos in 1945, where he served as architectural superintendent of construction for the Manhattan Project, reporting directly to Robert J. Oppenheimer himself. As if we didn't already have enough interesting parallels to the Manhattan Project, recall that according to David Grush, early UFO legacy programs were modeled after the secrecy of the Manhattan Project. It then stands to reason the same architectural superintendent who was responsible for construction under the Manhattan Project, which operated under obscene secrecy and compartmentalization, Max Flatow, and his soon-to-be partner Jason Moore, would serve as ideal architects for technical facilities to satisfy early UFO legacy program sites. Now would probably be a good time to dive into FFRDCs, or again, federally funded research and development centers. The government-owned, contractor-operated, semi-private institutions, I believe, are the critical missing link in any UFO Legacy Program operation. To a lesser extent, I also believe university-affiliated research centers, or UARCs, which are the academic sister of FFRDCs, are integral pieces to UFO legacy programs, but not in the same esteemed subject matter expert/authoritative positions as FFRDCs. So why do I speak so frequently of FFRDCs and actually label these institutions as carrying even more importance than contractors like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or SAIC in the overall framework of UFO legacy program operations? Well, recall how I state FFRDCs serve as the middleman between the US DoD/IC and corporate defense industrial base contractors in UFO programs. These quote-unquote semi-private organizations are sponsored by the DoD, IC, or Department of Energy elements and act as R&D aces, subject matter experts, and program manager in said UFO programs. In my theory, which I am supremely confident on, utilizing FFRDCs for these clandestine SAPs, CAPs, and USAPs allows unparalleled technical and scientific expertise and strict information control to contractors. Essentially, FFRDCs, which are still strongly tied to federal elements of the defense industrial base, allows UFO Legacy Program administrators, which in my opinion include but are not limited to the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, the Edwards 412 Test Wing, the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology, and more, to control the flow of information, intelligence, data, as well as access to materials to defense contractors. This in turn allows UFO Legacy Program leads and FFRDCs to conduct UFO RDT&E operations with defense contractors in obscene levels of compartmentalization, with some contractor scientists and engineers not even knowing what they are working on. As far as I am aware in my framework of UFO legacy programs, it is the contractors employed with a need to know, or more specifically, contractor middle management, such as corporate directors for special programs, who are the lucky few in defense contractors with full briefings into the scope of their UFO legacy program. FFRDCs were first established during World War II, formerly known as FCRCs, or Federal Contract Research Centers, as semi-academic laboratories and research groups created by the federal government for defense research. FFRDCs grew from the quote, need to obtain objective assessments of military problems or programs of increasing technical complexity, end quote. FFRDCs today typically are government-owned, contractor-operated facilities, which allows these operations to maintain extremely close ties to the United States government, while functioning and masquerading under the guise of a private sector resource while not even having to compete for federal contracts against non-FFRDCs. While receiving more than 70% of their financial support from the USG, FFRDCs today have access to government and supplier data, employees, and facilities beyond that common in a normal contractual relationship. The special relationship here between USG and FFRDCs lie on the sponsor or managing agency that control the federally funded Research and Development Center. A couple examples here include the Department of Energy, NASA, or DoD elements such as the Air Force. This quote-unquote special relationship requires the FFRDC to meet numerous special needs of the sponsor. Comprehensive knowledge of sponsor needs, mission, culture, expertise, and institutional memory regarding issues of enduring concern to the sponsor. Adaptability, ability to respond to emerging needs of their sponsor and anticipate future critical issues. Objectivity, ability to produce thorough independent analyses to address complex technical and analytical problems. freedoms from conflicts of interest and dedication to the public interest, independence from commercial, shareholder, political, or other associations, though this isn't true, long-term continuity, uninterrupted, consistent support based on a continuing relationship, broad access to sensitive government and commercial proprietary information, absence of institutional interest that could lead to misuse of information or cause contractor reluctance to provide such information, and again, not true, quick response capability, ability to offer short-term assistance to help sponsors meet urgent and high-priority requirements. Here in 2025, 42 such FFRDCs exist in the United States. And in 2020 alone, FFRDCs received $15.4 billion in acknowledged funding, or 10.2% of the estimated federal government R&D spending. Indeed, according to Congress.gov, quote, over the years, Congress has been concerned with the oversight and management of FFRDCs, end quote. FFRDCs contain the personnel, expertise, prowess, and most importantly, access to defense industrial base knowledge, facilities, and assets to serve as program managers in UFO legacy programs. I strongly, and I mean very strongly, believe FFRDCs hold the keys to warehouses and facilities storing UFO legacy program data, equipment, and recovered materials. I actually hypothesize we can observe a strong example of this if we recall the 2011 failed Kona Blue PSAP, or Prospective Access Program. Kona Blue would have seen a divestment of recovered UFO materials from Lockheed Martin to BASS under the OSAP program.
So Lockheed Martin wanted to divest itself from this material at a specific facility that's known to me that I provided to the Inspector General. Like street address, all that, right? And the idea was if they made a catcher's mitt, a security catcher's mitt for the most serious SAP possible, the contractor and the other government customer, which was the Central Intelligence Agency, for that specific Lockheed material, and it was they recovered from like the 50s and stuff, and it was like bits and pieces of like hull structure like that. But going back to that transfer with Lockheed, long story short, can't get into all the nuanced details, but basically the CIA said F you to DIA and Lockheed, and it was totally killed. So Harry Reid's request to get the material transferred to the OSAP program was totally killed because of bureaucracy and kind of fiefdom stuff.
In a working theory of mine, FFRDCs like the MITRE Corporation or Sandia, as we discussed in Kissner's disclosures, are supposed to retain custody of all recovered UFO materials. When Dr. James Ryder of Lockheed Martin attempted to dole out craft material to another quote-unquote uninitiated contractor, Lockheed Martin, still housing recovered materials in a corporate warehouse, lit up the CIA's radar like a nuke flash code. And thus, the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology swooped in and killed the transfer. And again, this is still a working theory in its infancy, but an interesting one nonetheless. That Kona Blue may have been ultimately killed because Lockheed attempted to divest materials through an unsanctioned UFO Legacy Program custodial chain, whereas FFRDCs, because they're partly government-owned, are supposed to house materials. Outside of our investigation of Sandia, FFRDCs have been lurking in the shadows with almost every single topic of today's video. From Robert Sarbacher to J. Andrew Kissner, we have discussed Vannevar Bush operating as a senior scientist in 1940s and 1950s UFO recovery and exploitation programs. During World War II, Bush aided in the creation of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Radiation Laboratory. MIT Rad Lab closed its doors on 31 December 1945, but reopened in 1951 as the newly formed MIT Lincoln Labs. Today, MIT Lincoln Labs operates as a Department of Defense Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, FFRDC, focused on adapting advanced technology problems for national security. How interesting is it then that in 1958, senior scientists and engineers from MIT Lincoln Labs created the SAGE, or Semi-Automatic Ground Environment System of large computers and network equipment, that compiled massive amounts of data from radar sites to provide a single unified image of airspace over a wide area. I have wondered if SAGE resulted in greater numbers of UFO detections over multi-sensor systems starting in 1958. Those same scientists from Lincoln Labs who created SAGE would go on to form the MITRE Corporation in 1958 as well. MITRE Corporation is an FFRDC based in McLean, Virginia, that I believe, alongside Sandia, Los Alamos, and a few others, is one of the paramount FFRDCs involved in UFO Legacy Programs. MITRE's early leadership was poached from other FFRDCs, including the Institute for Defense Analyses and the RAND Corporation. And the RAND Corporation was the first ever FFRDC spun from Air Force Project RAND. I have discussed before how RAND was likely intimately involved in the selection, design, and construction of deep underground military bases across the continental United States. Take the VHST, or Very High-Speed Transit System, for example, an idea originating from RAND that detailed a hyper-fast underground train system connecting critical locations across the continental US. MITRE also housed many figures I have directly accused of operating as gatekeepers and high-level legacy program personnel. And these include Donald Kerr, who also spearheaded EG&G in Los Alamos, and Paul Kaminsky, a colonel in US SysCom and Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology. Outside of MITRE, another connection between these men, well, the NRO. And maybe that's an interesting place to look for senior legacy program leadership. I talk about MITRE a lot, but many have never even heard of MITRE, and why is this? Well, perhaps this is because MITRE engages with a tremendous amount of clandestine, deep-sixed USAPs, dealing with USO and undersea UFO operations, which I understand is the most secretive aspect of UFO legacy programs, but this is another topic for another day. MITRE was established in 1958, and the Aerospace Corporation, a DoD and Air Force-sponsored FFRDC, which spun out of TRW. And yes, I have covered this in depth in my Northrop Grumman video, was established in 1960. Is it a coincidence that these two early FFRDCs, which have been majorly implicated in UFO legacy program operations, specifically material exploitation, were started at the same time that Colonel Philip J. Corso stated recovered UFO technologies were being seeded into U.S. industry to bolster the U.S. war machine? FFRDCs inherently exist to solve quote-unquote unique science, technology, national security, and more problems for the United States, with unrivaled subject matter expertise and prowess. These FFRDCs are required to maintain extremely close ties with their sponsors, many of whom have allegedly operated as integral pieces to UFO legacy program operations for decades, while enjoying extensive access to U.S. proprietary and classified data, information, and materials. Structuring programs focused on the recovery, exploitation, and derivation of exotic technologies of unknown origin with FFRDCs, government-owned, contractor-operated institutions as a centerpiece, is truly an ingenious method that retains quote-unquote in-house custody of UFO information, data, and technology, while still engaging the best of U.S. defense industry within the projects. And I spend so much time here on other FFRDCs similar to MITRE, RAND, Aerospace, Lincoln Labs, etc., outside of our main subject, Sandia, because I truly believe analysis of the complex web of the formation of the United States' earliest FFRDCs between the 1940s to 1960 allows us a truly substantial glimpse into the formation of early UFO legacy programs and their organizational structure that exists to this day. From J. Andrew Kissner stating custody of recovered UFOs was handed to Atomic Energy Commission-owned but civilian-operated labs in the late 1940s that coincided with the establishment of Sandia at the behest of President Truman himself, to Colonel Philip J. Corso stating UFO hardware was seeded into U.S. industry to bolster the U.S. war machine. At the same convenient time, several of the most prominent FFRDCs I believe are paramount in UFO programs were spun up from other institutions I also believe operate or operated within exotic RDT&E. The establishment of each and every early US FFRDC displays bizarre, intriguing, and tangible connections to UFO Legacy Program operations. Yet, Sandia and similar national laboratories stand apart from the extensive list of 42 FFRDCs. And this differentiating factor, their sponsor, the Department of Energy, and its subordinate semi-autonomous agency, the National Nuclear Security Administration. I could spend all day talking about the Department of Energy, and trust me, after this section we will really dig into some DOE/former AEC atomic testing at the Nevada test site with Sandia that is of extreme relevance to UFO legacy programs. But at the end of the day, this video is about Sandia, not the DOE. However, to understand Sandia and its DOE-sponsored effort to accomplish critical national security missions, we better understand DOE classification systems, the DOE's semi-autonomous agency, the National Nuclear Security Administration, and Sandia/National Lab FFRDC's position within the U.S. National Nuclear Security Enterprise. Sandia and a handful of select National Lab FFRDCs stand out amongst the 16 DOE-sponsored FFRDCs, as working with the National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA, to accomplish critical and clandestine missions for the U.S. National Nuclear Security Enterprise, or NNSE. The NNSE here exists as a collection of, quote, DOE laboratories, Nevada National Security Site, production plants, and processing facilities involved in the design, production, and testing of nuclear weapons, end quote. And of course, here, the Nevada National Security Site is the former Nevada test site, which we will actually dive into shortly. But outside of Sandia, DOE-sponsored FFRDC national labs that are critical pieces to the NNSA and NNSE include Lawrence Livermore National Lab, Los Alamos National Lab, administered by Triad National Security LLC, aka Battelle Memorial Institute, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory within the Y-12 National Security Complex, managed by UT Battelle LLC, that's located in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which was, like Sandia, also formerly administered by Lockheed Martin. Oak Ridge, of course, housed disgraced ex-Aero director Sean Kirkpatrick in a senior role after he left Aero. Though, curiously, this webpage celebrating Kirkpatrick as Chief Technology Officer for Defense and Intelligence Programs was mysteriously deleted off the site. In my video on Lockheed Martin, I also discussed some information I had received from a source of mine. I did proceed with a disclaimer: these claims were simply conjecture, and I could not back them up. However, I think it is worthy to restate these witness claims and add a bit more context here. I have spoken to sources intimately involved with Oak Ridge, who have informed me not one, but 2 recovered non-human discs are housed in a top-secret facility below Oak Ridge in the Y-12 complex. This underground facility is inaccessible to the public and non-program personnel. Allegedly, one focus of legacy programs beneath Oak Ridge is the study of the quote-unquote skin of UFOs. And these programs may involve Battelle and the MITRE Corporation. And the apparent program manager here of this UFO Legacy Program operation beneath Oak Ridge, well, this would be the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, or OICI, or DOE INT, as I like to call them. I wonder if Kirkpatrick engaged with these programs when he ran and tucked tail from Arrow. So what immediate ties can we make between Sandia, National Lab FFRDCs, and their sponsor, the Department of Energy / the NNSA, with highly classified, deep-sixed programs focused on exotic technologies of unknown origin? National labs such as Sandia, embedded within DOE / NNSA special access programs, experience security and security control mechanisms even beyond standard SAP USAP CAP security protocols, creating an ideal security blanket with need-to-know access for UFO Legacy Program operations. DOE SAPs and compartmentalized programs are established under Executive Order 12356, or the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, that we will actually delve into more soon, that, quote, imposes additional controls governing access to classified information, end quote, including additional controls such as, quote, access approval, adjunction, or investigation requirements, special designation of officials authorized to determine a need to know, or special lists of persons determined to have a need to know, end quote. Sandia personnel within Department of Energy SAPs must both contain appropriate security clearances and possess a need to know to access special classified information, special nuclear materials, SNM, or restricted and formally restricted data outlined in the 1954 Atomic Energy Act. It is therefore reasonable to assume Sandia personnel operating within UFO Legacy Program operations would possess a need to know as well as a Q clearance, which is the DOE's highest security clearance equivalent to a DoD top secret, plus SCI, or sensitive compartmented information. It is my belief that the DOE / NNSA and their national laboratory FFRDCs, such as Sandia, operate UFO Legacy Programs under security apparatuses managed by the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. And yes, again, the DOE has its own intelligence agency. DOE OICI provides support for all 17 DOE national laboratories and offices, including the 3 FFRDCs under NNSA control. Interestingly enough, the NNSA conducts specific intelligence-related activities on behalf of OICI as part of its core missions. Amongst its official duties, Department of Energy Intelligence largely provides unique insights on quote-unquote foreign nuclear capabilities.
They're basically treating this as nuclear secrets because it gives off nuclear radiation. Because if you look at the ultra vague definition of special nuclear material, which is Section 51 of the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, it says anything that gives off a sizable amount of atomic energy. Literally, that's what it says. Well, what's sizable, and what legal gymnastics are you saying this stuff, which is obviously not who knows, maybe it is a nuclear weapon, and you're saying this is a U.S. nuclear secret, you're transclassifying it into a nuclear secret, which I understand maybe at first why they did that, and I'm not admonishing the hard decisions that presidents and other folks did many years ago when this was more of an enigma and we wanted to lock it down, figure it out, and then see what we're going to do.
Like David Grush, I believe DOE, NNSA, FFRDC, National Lab, UFO Legacy Program operations utilize DOE and DOE intelligence classification standards outlined in the 1954 Atomic Energy Act to hide UFO materials, programs, and information. These include the aforementioned Special Nuclear Material, SNM, Transclassified Foreign Nuclear Information, Foreign Intelligence Information, or FII, and more, possibly including foreign origin radioactive material, exotic nuclear material, etc. Let's take foreign intelligence information here as an example. FII is managed by DOE OICI and relates to the capabilities, intentions, and activities of foreign powers, organizations, or persons. FII carries special caveats for control and access. And these include WN Intel, or Warning Notice, Intelligence Sources and Methods Involved. ORCON, which is the dissemination and extraction of information controlled by originator. And non-contract, which is not releasable to contractors/consultants. Recall my framework of FFRDC roles within UFO Legacy Programs outlined earlier in this project. FFRDCs are used by elements of USG in such programs because FFRDCs are government-owned. I wonder if DOE OICI non-contract FII is releasable to FFRDCs in particular, and thus a mechanism through which UFO materials, information, craft, and possibly bodies can be passed to FFRDCs like Sandia's hands while keeping them from contractor or consultants' hands. And yes, I understand that was a ton of acronyms there. So let's actually slow down and learn a little bit more about DOE, NNSA, and the AEC. The Department of Energy, or DOE as I like to call it, was created in 1977 after the abolishment of its precursor entity, the Atomic Energy Commission, in 1974. The Atomic Energy Commission also produced the NRC and ERDA. Many here are deeply familiar with the Atomic Energy Commission and its significance in UFO legacy programs through its Atomic Energy Acts. In 1946, for example, the AEC established the 1946 Atomic Energy Act, which helped establish national laboratories that would eventually become the DOE FFRDCs. But more importantly, in my opinion, was the publishing of the 1954 Atomic Energy Act, which has been identified in the UAPDA legislation as acting as a gatekeeping structure for myriad UFO materials, knowledge, artifacts, etc., sequestering such into the deepest bowels of a United States classification as, quote, transclassified foreign nuclear information, end quote. I've discussed the AEC and DOE in regards to UFO legacy programs many times before on this channel. One of my most critical investigations, in my opinion, was linking the DOE NEST, or Nuclear Emergency Support Team, to UFO crash retrieval operations, specifically the 1997 Jonathan Weygandt UFO crash retrieval encounter. This incident saw a young USMC Lance Corporal encounter a massive teardrop-shaped crashed UFO that he thought was offensively downed by humans. When attempting to depart the crash site, Weygandt and his fellow Marines, one of which actually attempted to intimidate me, were intercepted by a tactical team in all black, featuring American dialects and no insignia. While detained at gunpoint, teams in MOP gear, or mission-oriented protective posture gear, departed two recently landed Army CH-47 Chinooks. These teams featured Department of Energy insignia and rain jackets. If you somehow have not heard of Weygandt, I can't recommend enough watching my project with this fantastic human being. I will be completely candid here and state I fully believe Weygandt in his encounter.
After we climbed back up, I think the DOE, Department of Energy people were there. They knew about it, and I don't know why we went there still to this day. But anyway, I was arrested. I had all my gear taken from me by men in black camis, had no name tags. They were older men, probably in their late 30s or 40s. I got in a little scuffle with them, and I hit one of them. I took a swing at one of them, and I hit him in the forehead.
Anyways, as I reckon, this team in MOP gear was DOE NEST. NEST was created under Executive Order 12656 to operate under the primary authority of the aforementioned 1954 Atomic Energy Act. NEST was founded as a DOE specialized nuclear emergency organization that assisted the FBI and numerous government agencies by, quote, providing technical expertise and advice in a response to a variety of potential incident threats involving nuclear materials, end quote. NEST operates as an umbrella organization to handle all nuclear and radiobiological emergencies for the DOE. NEST's mission is to, quote, be prepared to respond immediately to any type of radiological accident or incident anywhere in the world, end quote. Funny enough, NEST themselves in a 1995 NEST Assessment Team report stated NEST operated in a very similar capacity to FFRDCs, quote, the laboratory program managers enjoy a relatively high degree of autonomy and independence with respect to focusing efforts and funding on those elements of their internal programs which they have deemed to be the most important, end quote. This management style around NEST Laboratories arose from the laboratory's heavy focus on research and development activities during NEST's formative years. Personnel comprising NEST historically does not comprise of DOE or DoD personnel, but rather contractors and FFRDCs. These include the former EG&G, Raytheon, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs. DOE assets on the Nevada test site are now the NNSS, and of course, Sandia National Labs. But now here is one interesting connection. In my project on Weygandt, I referenced the book Diffusing Armageddon Inside NEST, America's Secret Nuclear Bomb Squad by author Jeffrey T. Richelson. Around November 1997, just months after Weygandt's encounter, Russia blasted a probe from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan carrying the Mars 96 probe. The fourth stage of this Proton rocket failed, leaving the rocket unable to escape Earth's atmosphere. Mars 96 did not carry an onboard nuclear reactor, but did in fact carry 18 small energy generators powered by plutonium-238. This was just enough to get NEST's attention. U.S. Space Command estimated the probe was large enough some pieces would survive re-entry. And the unlucky countries possibly impacted by the debris were to be neighboring countries to Peru, where Weygandt observed the crash retrieval, Bolivia or Colombia. NEST debated deployment to Bolivia or Colombia, two countries considered, quote, not very important, end quote, but ceased action once surviving debris landed west of South America in the Pacific Ocean. But what is interesting here is the same year as Weygandt's encounter, 1997, NEST considered deployment to recover a probe in neighboring countries to Peru. NEST acted off intelligence gathered from U.S. Space Command and their Defense Support Program, or DSP satellites. Now, if you remember to way earlier in this project, who worked intimately on fielding payloads and ground processing systems for the 23 Defense Support Program satellites? And yes, that's right, Sandia. Perhaps outside of operating with DOE as a scientific on-site UFO crash retrieval team, Sandia has also aided in various intelligence gathering methods with the highly classified DSP satellites at the behest of UFO Legacy Programs. Tackling the entire DOE is a monolith, and one day I would actually like to attempt this Herculean task. But for now, let's go ahead and focus on the DOE's semi-autonomous agency that relates directly to Sandia. In the year 2000, the National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA, was established as an aforementioned semi-autonomous agency within the DOE. The NNSA is responsible for national nuclear security safeguarding through military application of nuclear science. NNSA is responsible for managing and modernizing the U.S. nuclear stockpile, as well as responding to nuclear or radiological incidents and threats. And oh, by the way, after the NNSA's creation in the year 2000, NEST became a DOE and NNSA team. The NNSA maintains close relationships with many of the institutions that have administrated DOE FFRDC national labs, including Triad National Security LLC and its controlling entity Battelle Memorial Institute, Lockheed Martin, Martin Marietta, and Honeywell. NNSA also oversees the Nevada National Security Site, aka the former Nevada Test Site, where I believe Sandia, through its management of the Tonopah Test Range, numerous numbered areas, and underground installations, has engaged for decades in clandestine UFO RDT&E. And as I said before, we are about to dive into this in great detail. But I talk about the NNSA because I believe this semi-autonomous agency within DOE that oversees national labs and FFRDCs like Sandia is often severely overlooked when it comes to discussion of UFO legacy programs. I believe that under the auspice of the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement, which misclassified UFO and accompanying materials as transclassified foreign nuclear information, where, by the way, NNSA's core authorities and responsibilities can be tracked and derived from, that the NNSA operates under the DOE on UFO recovery and RDT&E programs. Indeed, the NNSA has been before directly connected to UFO crash retrieval encounters.
The recent launch of a secret military payload may provide clues in solving a local mystery, the crash of that unidentified object near the Colorado River.
2 years ago this month, something fell out of the sky and landed with a thud on the riverbank south of Needles. The I-Team has been chasing the story ever since.
And George Knapp is here with some new information about the Needles crash and the object that fell from the sky.
And of course, we're calling it a UFO, but that's in a literal sense because it is still unidentified. Half a dozen witnesses have told us they saw it in the sky or watched it being carried away by a phalanx of military helicopters. Was it a spy plane or a drone or something more exotic? Several eyewitnesses say the mystery object blazed out of the sky in the early morning hours of May 14, 2008. The long cylinder with the turquoise glow was seen over Bullhead City by former cop Frank Costigan and others. It seemed at one point to slow down in its descent.
On 14 May 2020, George Knapp published an article titled, quote, "Strange Object Crashes in Needles. Investigation Leads to Secretive Government Agency," end quote. This piece discussed a little-known alleged UFO crash retrieval operation that occurred in 2008 in Needles, California, which borders southern Nevada and Arizona. According to Knapp's reporting, following the crash of a strange aerial object on the banks of the Colorado River, quote-unquote men in black types shortly arrived to the scene. Witnesses observed military-style convoys embarking through the town, with witnesses stating, quote, "One of the four-wheel drive trucks with the shell on the back had bumps, radar domes, things like that," end quote. As well as, quote, "They've been seen in the area over the past several months, and sometimes many of them, not just one or two," end quote. According to ex-police officer Frank Costigan and other witnesses, some of the personnel on site wore uniforms that said Nevada Test Site or wore badges from the NNSA. Knapp identified these bizarre vehicle convoys as NNSA OST, or Office of Secure Transportation.
Since 1947, the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, and its predecessor agencies have moved nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons components and special nuclear material by a variety of commercial and government transportation modes. In the late 1960s, the Albuquerque Operations Office was directed to expand its transportation system to provide protection to all shipments involving special nuclear material. An increase in political acts of violence prompted a review of procedures for the safeguarding of the materials. In 1975, the Office of Secure Transportation was established, and responsibility for nuclear weapons transportation was transferred to the Albuquerque Operations Office of the Atomic Energy Commission, predecessor to the Department of Energy. In 2000, DOE created the National Nuclear Security Administration. This office administers the total United States nuclear weapons program, including the design, production, and delivery of nuclear weapons and components.
Indeed, Sandia themselves have supplied the NNSA OST with MGTs, or Mobile Guardian Units for transportation of, quote, nuclear materials, special components, and nuclear weapons across the country, end quote. The Sandia Mobile Guardian Transporter is the third generation of OST 18-wheel tractor-trailer vehicles that are even more impressive and comprehensive than the OST's signature SGT, or Safeguards Transporter.
OST has developed the Safeguards Transporter, or SGT, a technologically advanced vehicle that enhances safety and security for special nuclear material cargoes. The SGT is constructed to survive very severe highway accidents, including impact and a long-duration fire. The SGTs are designed and built to deter, surprise, and delay even the most aggressive adversary.
Now, is it possible the DOE NNSA and DOE FFRDCs utilize the OST to transport UFO materials across the United States? In the days of the Atomic Energy Commission, numerous US-based UFO crash retrieval reports apparently saw removal from crash sites or transportation between SAP-Fs by US Army low-boy-style trailers. I think it is quite feasible that under the authority of Transclassified Foreign Nuclear Information, or SNM, special nuclear material, UFO craft and debris could, since 1975, have been transported within the continental United States by the OST, hiding behind the Atomic Energy Commission and DOE's complex nuclear and radiological security control mechanisms. OST also works with an enforcement federal protective force under the DOE/NNSA, and this is known as the Special Response Team, or SRT.
OST convoys are composed of unmarked escort and transport vehicles. The only easily recognized feature is the U.S. government license plate. Escort vehicles always accompany transport vehicles. Transports are conventional 3-axle truck tractors with 2-axle semi-trailers, while the escort vehicles vary in design. The personnel who operate these vehicles are NNSA federal agents. They are highly trained, well-armed, and authorized to use deadly force to protect their cargo. Each federal agent completes more than 1,000 hours of agent candidate training and receives continuous training throughout his or her career in the form of operational readiness training. They receive detailed instruction on the techniques of operating all necessary equipment, as well as conducting paramilitary operations. They also receive expert instruction in tactics, including the use of a variety of firearms. Instruction on the complex operating procedures and safe handling of the tractor-trailers are given enormous emphasis because the Office of Secure Transportation logs over 4.5 million miles each year.
I have talked about these formerly Wackenhut trained and staffed quote-unquote nuclear commandos, entrusted with safeguarding nuclear materials and secrets on many occasions in my projects in the past. Historically, since at least the late 90s, DOE SRT units have also provided security for sensitive DOE defense nuclear facilities, and these include Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia. I have previously theorized with low confidence DOE SRT was the on-site team alongside DOE Nest that detained and interrogated Jonathan Weygandt in 1997. Additionally, in that same year of 1997, I theorized with medium to high confidence DOE SRT served as the ground-based team below a triangular alien reproduction vehicle, or possibly some sort of derivative vehicle that apprehended USMC Sergeant Roderick Castle, who stumbled upon an unknown clandestine operation during the Hunter-Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment. NNSA's OST additionally works alongside the DOE/NNSA Nest we just spoke of. Under DOE Order 153.1a, the Office of Secure Transportation states, quote, may provide transportation for the Nest, nuclear weapons, nuclear weapon components, and SNM within the continental United States, end quote. This here is a developing theory of mine, but of course in my opinion, a very compelling one. Under the DOE's semi-autonomous agency NNSA, using FFRDCs such as Sandia, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, the NNSA leverages NEST OST and SRT for the on-site recovery, procurement, and transportation of recovered UFOs under the guise of the 1954 Atomic Energy Act. This theory of mine, which sees these three elements of NNSA, which again are NEST, SRT, and OST, all three of which have direct ties to Sandia, operate to ensure full mission success and secrecy to recover downed non-human craft, and transport secure materials between national security sites with above and below ground infrastructure to hold these materials. These locations, DOE National Lab FFRDCs, like Sandia, Los Alamos, and Oak Ridge. But Sandia and NNSA's ties to legacy programs does not end here. So let's now zoom out and visit the Nevada test site. The Nevada test site, formerly known as the Nevada Proving Ground, is infamous in United States nuclear history. As the premier avenue for U.S. nuclear device testing, established under the Atomic Energy Commission by President Harry Truman in 1951, out of the Nellis Air Force Gunnery and Bombing Range. From 1951 to 1994, the Nevada test site and its massive swath of land in Nye County, Nevada, saw 928 nuclear tests. The site encompassed over 1,350 square miles in Nevada, nearly the size of the U.S. state of Rhode Island. As of 2010, the Nevada test site's evolving mission saw the NTS renamed as the Nevada National Security Site, or NNSS, as you've heard me say throughout this video. NNSS is supported by the N2S2, or Nevada National Security Sites, plural, a network of facilities and laboratories across the continental United States that supports the missions of the former NTS. The Nevada National Security Site to this day is operated by the U.S. Department of Energy and controlled by the NNSA. And if you're somehow just tuning into this video, the NNSA, or National Nuclear Security Administration, was established in 2000 as a semi-autonomous DOE agency that is, quote, responsible for enhancing national security through the military application of nuclear science. NNSA maintains and enhances the safety, security, and effectiveness of the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile, works to reduce the global danger from weapons of mass destruction, provides the U.S. Navy with safe and militarily effective nuclear propulsion, and responds to nuclear and radiological emergencies in the United States and abroad, end quote. We have already talked so much about the NNSA today, but for now, just understand the NNSA and their Nevada Field Office, or NFO, conducts three major missions at the Nevada National Security Site: national security/defense, environmental management, and non-defense. Experimental programs on the NNSS are sponsored by three federally funded research and development centers and parts to the larger N2S2. Los Alamos National Labs, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, and Sandia National Labs. Any surprise there? Indeed, Sandia has for decades operated as a critical component to Nevada Test Site, or Nevada National Security Site, weapons testing, RDT, and operations and maintenance programs, and numerous top-secret nuclear and other programs. For the sake of this project, we will largely utilize the name Nevada Test Site, or NTS, due to much larger name recognition over NNSS/N2S2. And we will do this because of the time frame in which we will be working. And I know I use a lot of acronyms on this channel, so I figure it'll be much easier to remember NTS over NNSS, which is way too similar to N2S2 and NNSA. Now, let's zoom out for a moment, because there's already some complicated naming conventions, and things will get way more complicated in this video, so let's go ahead and deal with this now. I talk often of the Nevada Test and Training Range, or NTTR, a U.S. Air Force major range and test facility base encompassing Area 51, Tonopah Test Range, and 4,500, square miles of federal land in Nevada, along with 12,000 square miles of airspace. This is the largest contiguous air and ground space available for peacetime military operations in the entire free world. I have before, on many occasions, implicated the NTTR in its former name, the 98th Range Wing, alongside Nellis Air Force Base, Area 51 administered by the Edwards 412th Test Wing, Area 51 S4, and the Edwards 412th Test Wing MRTFB, as operating an Air Force UFO Legacy Program operations that oversees RDT&E of alien reproduction vehicles, or derivative technology if you want to call it that. This program was brought to my attention by Witness Ed, an Air Force colonel that graduated from the 412th AFFTC, or Air Force Flight Test Center Test Pilot School, but also operated as an Electronics Warfare Group test director out of the 412th Test Wing, where Ed claimed he operated as a strategic debriefer and mediator between pilots, contractors, and engineers for flight tests of alien reproduction vehicles. Ed claimed this program featured Boeing and Lockheed Martin as principal contractors. The NTTR and Nevada Test Site are two different entities. The NTTR is a major range and test facility base operated by the U.S. Air Force, while the NTS operates inside the NTTR as a playground for the DOE and NNSA. Many key sites exist within the NTS, including Area 51 Groom Lake and myriad numbered quote-unquote areas. I encourage folks to listen back to my initial interview with Randy Anderson, a former U.S. Army Green Beret 18 Bravo weapons sergeant, who claimed he was led into the Off-World Technologies Division at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana. And this Off-World Technologies Division was ran, in my opinion, by contractor SAIC. Anderson discussed seeing advanced aerospace vehicles and electrogravitic triangles stationed at U.S. DoD installations that were located near Area 51 on Department of Energy-controlled lands. These DOE lands, of course, exist as the Nevada test sites, and numerous, and I mean numerous locations on the NTS, as we will soon investigate, were, and likely still today, are operated by Sandia National Labs. Perhaps Anderson possibly observing such craft at Sandia-managed locations on DOE-ran Nevada test site land gives some credence to Air Force Master Sergeant Edgar Fouche and his claims of the reverse-engineered TR-3B. I discuss Fouche and TR-3B often, and I mean often, and that is why I've relegated him to about an hour and 45 minutes into this video. And whilst Fouche provided no concrete evidence for his claims, I still find a tremendous amount of value and possibly truth in his testimony, such as Fouche in the 1990s and 2000s stating TR-3B pilots hailed from the Navy Test Pilot School, as well as the Edwards AFFTC. I would come to hold the statement ARV pilots hail from the AFFTC in very high regard with the 2023 testimony of the aforementioned Ed. Fouche stated the nuclear-powered TR-3B that utilized rotating MFD plasma, not for anti-gravity, but for gravity reduction purposes, was a joint engineering effort from contractors such as Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, Teledyne Ryan, and was overseen by the NRO, NSA, and CIA. According to Fouche's TR-3B framework, the propulsion device on the 250-foot prototype and 600-foot operational models were reverse-engineered from extraterrestrial technology by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Sandia National Laboratory.
My name is Edgar Fouche. I'm here to speak about secret government technology, reverse engineering of alien artifacts. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called the magnetic field disruptor, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. It's far ahead of anything you've ever imagined as far as technology. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed a reverse-engineered MFD, and I believe the government will go at any lengths to protect this technology.
This framework actually makes crystal clear sense to me. As we have discussed today, I believe FFRDCs such as Sandia are often the missing link in discussion of USG and contractor UFO legacy programs. It is my understanding that in these deep sixed carve-out USAPs, FFRDCs often serve as subject matter experts and R&D aces, a perfect tool for US DoD or IC, as FFRDCs are government-controlled and only semi-private. FFRDC leads are often former high-level DoD/IC folks themselves, like generals or agency senior intelligence service with existing allegiances to US clandestine quote-unquote exotic RDT&E. In UFO Legacy Programs, I believe FFRDCs control access to information and materials to contractors, allowing the governing DoD or IC Legacy Program agency to retain strict information control over the project. Therefore, when Fouche states numerous defense contractors were involved to keep different parts of R&D compartmentalized, but the two FFRDCs on the TR-3B project, Sandia and Lawrence Livermore, were responsible for reverse engineering the propulsion system of a recovered non-human craft, likely the most sensitive and secretive component of the recovered technical vehicle. This comports strongly with my understanding of UFO Legacy Programs. But anyways, let's get back to the Nevada test site and connect some dots to Sandia. Tonopah Test Range, a classified Department of Energy weapons testing range managed by Sandia National Labs, sits within the NTTR but outside of the Nevada test site. Regardless of Tonopah sitting outside the NTS or NNSS, I do want to make a brief mention to Tonopah, as it contains strong relevance to our project, and after all, Tonopah still conducts critical missions in support of the modern-day NNSS, or former Nevada test site, at the behest of DOE and NNSA. Recently in my project on Lockheed Martin, I accused Tonopah Test Range as serving as a critical RDT&E range to UFO Legacy Program locations. And the connective tissue from that video to today, Tonopah's manager, Sandia, which was managed by Martin Marietta and Lockheed Martin from 1993 to 2017. Tonopah and its operations under manager Sandia, an occupational Air Force element, the Edwards 412 Test Wing, funny enough, are highly classified. Quote, Tonopah is the testing range of choice for all national security missions. Tonopah Test Range TTR provides research and development test support for all the Department of Energy's weapons programs. The range also offers a unique test environment for use by other government agencies and their contractors, end quote. I won't spend too much time on Tonopah, as I just covered the range in depth and highly recommend checking out my Lockheed Martin project to learn more if you haven't already. There is some really interesting stuff we cover there, such as Tonopah housing an acknowledged Site 4. But I do want to stay with Tonopah briefly, and this is due to a 2021 instance in which respected UFO historian Richard Dolan detailed information from a source leaking details allegedly from the classified UAP Task Force report presented to Congress. This source of Dolan outlined the RDT&E of several incredibly advanced propulsion systems taking place within the Nevada Test and Training Range, alongside propulsion projects already sounding like science fiction, such as antimatter propulsion systems. Dolan's source additionally detailed advanced use of exotic elements for energy research dealing with recovered non-human technology. According to Dolan's source, these highly classified projects harnessed the black budget, confidential funds, and sometimes funds from contractors themselves, aka IRAD. And that these projects were spearheaded by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and managed by a classified group called Advanced Group 6. Allegedly, prototypes of these craft utilizing the above technology, including platforms leveraging exotic non-human materials and systems, are flown out of Area 51 and Tonopah Test Range. I spent some time in the Lockheed video discussing this nebulous Advanced Group 6. At the time, I had no leads. However, I do believe I may have some advancement on uncovering this group possibly connected to the NRO. But that is not where I want to investigate for this project, so maybe look for that moving forward. Indeed, Dolan's source mentioning DARPA is quite intriguing to me. Not often do I see the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, a DoD agency that funds breakthrough technologies for national security, and an agency responsible for the development of emerging technologies for use by military, mentioned directly alongside UFO Legacy Programs. Sure, we may have Tim Phillips stating DARPA personnel confiscated the footage from the 2004 Nimitz encounter.
We actually had our chief technology officer in the office was at a cocktail party in Old Town Alexandria and ran into the former director of DARPA, retired at the time, and we were talking about the Nimitz and how frustrating it was trying to solve something that occurred over 20 years ago, and we didn't have access to the records to truly understand the event. And our officer happened to find out that DARPA was there, and it was actually some DARPA technicians dressed in black that had flew out to the Princeton. There was a retired chief on the Princeton that was in a television show, and he actually discussed one evening, a helicopter landed on their flight deck, and a bunch of civilians in black dropped out. And what was so unusual about that is these civilians went into the captain's stateroom. That is unusual behavior on a warship. But while they're underway, went into the stateroom, and then when they emerged and got back on the helicopter, they were carrying a lot of equipment and kit with them.
But even I myself have hardly covered DARPA. Previously, I have mentioned the Defense Advanced Research Center as outlined by Edgar Fouche. The DARS, according to Fouche, operated as an underground UFO Legacy Program facility with at least 10 stories situated near Area 51 Groom Lake within the Nevada test site. Allegedly, full anti-gravity propulsion systems were developed in the DARS, possibly by Sandia. The DARS is not proven to exist. However, we can look to a declassified study out of the Advanced Research Project Agency, ARPA, the historical name for DARPA. This study discusses the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, or ABMA, a team spearheaded by Nazi V-2 rocket scientist and pivotal figure in NASA, Wernher von Braun. The ARPA study details a draft DoD directive that discussed ABMA being considered for transfer into the Defense Advanced Research Center. I do want to cover DARPA more in the future, as I firmly believe DARPA is nasty and ruthless when it comes to UFO Legacy SAP program protection, especially the DARPA Security and Intelligence Directorate. But for the purpose of our video, DARPA now exists as a connective thread to other secretive areas across the NTS, managed by Sandia, possibly connected to UFO Legacy Program operations, and specifically here, Area 6. But before Area 6, let's zoom out. Sandia, as we stated, has played a major role in the Nevada test site. From supporting the modern-day NNSA experimental missions to nuclear weapons testing by the fledgling Sandia Labs in the early 1950s, Sandia and the NTS are absolutely inseparable. We can find Sandia's fingerprints all over the NTS, such as Sandia operating critical classified programs at Area 51 since at least 1959. Sandia additionally operated as a major facility administrator, constructor, manager, and RDT&E PM across the Nevada test site, and we can find some truly incredible historical records of this work, from the 1970s up until Sandia was taken over by Martin Marietta in 1993. At the Nevada test site, Sandia worked closely with defense contractor Edgerton, Germanhausen, and Greer, also known as the infamous EG&G and their Special Projects Division. At the NTS, EG&G played a critical role in developing and providing essential timing, control, and high-speed photographic equipment for nuclear weapons testing, along with numerous classified SAPs. EG&G is notorious in the subject of UFOs, as both serving as the contractor that allegedly hired Bob Lazar to work at Area 51 S4, as well as EG&G's Nevada parking lot, serving as the backdrop for the infamous meeting between VADM Thomas Wilson and Eric Davis that ultimately produced the Wilson-Davis Notes. I won't discuss too much of EG&G, a contractor that I am highly confident was involved in UFO Legacy Programs, and possibly still is to this day, as after a complex series of business transactions, EG&G's assets have become part of Amentum, an enormous defense industrial base contractor. Immaculate Constellation whistleblower Matthew Brown inferred operates hangars housing recovered non-human materials at the Navy MRTFB Patuxent River. I largely defer discussion of EG&G to my good friend Luigi Venditilli and his incredible upcoming documentary project Gravatar. This project is the premier investigation into Bob Lazar, and I am so beyond excited for this film to release. Similar to Sandia in prior works, EG&G and their Special Projects Division, akin to the modern-day Skunk Works, has surfaced in a tremendous amount of my investigations. I have previously explored intriguing business relationships with SAIC and EG&G, possibly related to UFO Legacy Program operations, as well as Donald M. Kerr, a former high-level intelligence community legend that I have accused of as serving as a UFO Legacy Program high-value target, and/or gatekeeper, whose professional credentials include MITRE trustee, SAIC director, director of Los Alamos, one of NNSA's crown jewels in the N2S2 alongside Sandia, and former president and director of EG&G from 1989 to 1992. If anyone out there could confirm if Bob Lazar was indeed contracted by EG&G to work at S4, it sure would be Kerr. But before we move on, I do want to mention one quick instance in which EG&G senior personnel claimed to house recovered UFOs and biologics that may have involved Sandia. In 1990, during the time EG&G largely ran operations at Area 51 alongside the Edwards 412 test wing, George Knapp began conducting research for a follow-up investigation on Area 51, flying saucers, S4, and EG&G. After receiving a tip from a family member of a senior manager at EG&G, Knapp would eventually meet and speak with the late Alfred O'Donnell. After some time, the late senior EG&G manager informed Knapp of some startling revelations. O'Donnell claimed in DoD/IC, and you can infer EG&G's possession, was a flying saucer recovered from New Mexico. Date not given. However, to this day, Knapp wagers this was the Roswell crash. According to O'Donnell, the recovered disc was kept at Indian Springs Air Force Base, now called Creech Air Force Base, until 1955, where it was transferred to a facility adjacent to Area 51. Allegedly, with the recovered disc came a live being. Knapp paraphrased O'Donnell's words to him, quote, "We didn't know what it was. To tell you the truth, we couldn't communicate with it. In the beginning, we didn't know what it was, we didn't know where it was from, and we didn't know what to do with it," end quote. This story gets so incredibly bizarre, like how after O'Donnell's initial revelations, an EG&G co-founder approved a meeting with Knapp, O'Donnell, and Dick D'Amato, a congressional staffer overseeing special access programs. From this meeting onward, O'Donnell's demeanor would change, and he would stay tight-lipped about UFOs and recovered non-human bodies. This continued until O'Donnell was interviewed for Annie Jacobson's Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top-secret military base. Near the end of the former EG&G senior manager's life, O'Donnell claimed Roswell was not the result of non-human intelligence crashing, but instead a Russian craft with, quote, grotesque, child-sized avatars, end quote, developed in human experiments by Nazi doctor and war criminal Joseph Mengele. Okay, I know we take a lot of breaks in my videos and tangents as well, but please stick with me as this is extremely important. The logic here about this disc allegedly being transported to an Area 51 adjacent facility in 1955 from Indian Springs/Creech Air Force Base could be reasoned as Area 51 officially being opened in 1955. Therefore, Area 51 and adjacent facilities, which allegedly hold optimal infrastructure over standard Air Force bases to house non-human craft. Thus, materials were transferred out of Indian Springs/Creech once Area 51 and its surrounding facilities opened. And of course, there is other discussion that Area 51 actually existed prior in the early 1950s, And I covered this topic with excellent researcher Ryan Wood, who actually proposed that boron mines near Area 51 served as a precursor UFO Legacy Program site. But indeed, I propose an alternative theory here. 1954 saw the introduction of the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement. We have devoted a significant amount of time in this video towards exploring this 1954 AEC agreement, and how this act likely gave rise to classification, authoritative, and gatekeeping structures surrounding UFO legacy programs. As I just outlined, I strongly believe this Atomic Energy Agreement equipped the DOE, DOE Intelligence, the NNSA, and their national lab FFRDCs with the tools to obfuscate UFO data and materials as trans-classified foreign nuclear information, special nuclear material, and foreign intelligence information, and actually handle and transport recovered technical vehicles and biologics through SRT, OST, and NEST. To me, I believe there are observable milestones in US DoD/IC/DOE history surrounding classified data, special access programs, and compartmentalization of sensitive defense industrial base programs that allows us to observe the event horizon that surrounds the black hole that is UFO legacy programs to grow even larger and ever more encompassing. These include the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement, the 1994 reorganization of SAPOC, 2021 Corporate Portfolio Program, and much more. The point I'm trying to make here regarding O'Donnell, and the theory I would like to propose: what if the recovered saucer quote-unquote studied by EG&G was moved in 1955 because of the 1954 Atomic Energy Act? The AEC Act saw bolstered secrecy surrounding UFO recovery and material exploitation programs, and saw physical materials moved into NTS secret installations highly likely ran by Sandia Laboratory. And this, of course, again comports with the statements of J. Andrew Kissner. Whether this be S4, another numbered area we will explore promptly, or unnamed desert bases I have come to learn are indeed real in the NTS. Sandia Laboratory and its storied history, beginning as Los Alamos' Z Division until 1949 when Sandia became its own entity entrusted with top-secret compartmentalized nuclear research. Sandia would be the perfect government-owned, contractor-operated, aka FFRDC, RDT&E, AEC Laboratory custodian for technologies of unknown origin. And again, as we will explore promptly, Sandia engaged in so many experiments, underground sites, and secret areas across the Nevada test site. Sandia was well suited to study such materials and house them under the protection of the 1954 Atomic Energy Act. Therefore, I think it is highly likely from the 1950s onward, probably up until today, elements of UFO legacy programs at the Nevada test site, or now Nevada National Security Site, sees recovered UFO hardware administrated in underground and above-ground SAP-Fs, or SAP facilities, by Sandia National Labs, and operated on by contractors evolving from EG&G to Lockheed Martin to maybe Honeywell. And perhaps there are some tangible relationships to explore here, such as how the former Indian Springs Air Force Base, now called Creech Air Force Base, that Al O'Donnell claimed housed a recovered UFO from 1947 to 1955, today conducts extensive operations at the Sandia-managed Tonopah Test Range, which we know is the premier classified site for DOE and national security clandestine missions. I spend so much time here going on sidetracks about EG&G, Area 51, the Nevada test site, and the 1954 Atomic Energy Commission Agreement. Because from 1972 to 1992, EG&G and the Nevada test site photo lab documented all aspects of Sandia National Laboratory's unclassified work on nuclear weapons testing. This collection is a mixed bag of images. The vast majority of the 20,000 EG&G/NTS photo lab images depict rocks, broken tools, or components. But some images depict hauntingly beautiful craters from nuclear explosions, unclassed experiments below NTS, a massive network of tunnels below the DOE-owned land, classified weapons storage depots, control rooms, and much more. I personally love the images of 1970s computers and equipment rooms. I understand some SAPF UFO Legacy Program locations may still use similar analog systems. And this is to maintain records, electronic documents, testing data, personnel lists, etc. on a completely closed network, so there may still be some locations that look somewhat similar. But in fact, this is an interesting point as well. In my video on Deep Underground Military Bases or DUMBs, I covered an anonymous letter to the legendary Leonard Stringfield dated 14 March 1975, which claims to recount the testimony of one Lieutenant Colonel Sims, a pseudonym. Amongst the intriguing mentions of contractors, FFRDCs, UARCs, and air bases involved in UFO research and investigation, the source here relayed Lieutenant Colonel Sims spoke of several computer banks hidden within underground installations scattered across the US, housing sophisticated computer equipment, electronic instrumentation, and mobile radar units. These underground installations employ, quote, squadrons of unmarked helicopters which have sophisticated instrumentation on board that are dispatched to areas of UFO activity to monitor these craft or airlift them out of an area if one has malfunctioned, end quote. So according to this Lieutenant Colonel Sims, these underground installations in question house both enormous closed computer banks as well as rapid reaction units for UFO retrievals and presumably other UFO Legacy Program operations. And an interesting twist, we can also look here to the book Trinity's Children, Living Along America's Nuclear Highways. The author here states, quote, there are more Cray supercomputers in New Mexico, an Air Force computer expert once said, than anywhere else. They are here at the Weapons Center, referring to Kirtland. They're across the street at Sandia. They're at Los Alamos up the highway, and they're at underground places nobody knows about, end quote. Could these Sandia quote-unquote underground computer depots in New Mexico possibly serve alongside NTS UFO Legacy Program sites' analog computer systems? Anyways, back to this collection of 20,000 plus Sandia images. Within this portfolio, I also take a keen interest in several photos of underground tunnels and experiments. I have come to firmly believe a network of deep underground military bases exists below the Nevada test site that likely connects to DUMBs below Edwards Air Force Base, China Lake, and the Antelope Valley Aerospace Complex. According to these images, as well as Trinity's Children by Bartimus and McCartney, as well as FOIA documents showing two underground facilities under the Manzano storage area at Kirtland Air Force Base / Sandia National Labs in New Mexico. Sandia has displayed a keen aptitude for operating underground installations. Perhaps Sandia is intimately connected as well to this alleged dumb network extended to the Mojave. Also within this collection of images, we have intriguing 1975 photos of Janet Airlines, the exclusive red-striped planes that shuttle employees to Area 51, Tonopah, and perhaps other classified locations, as well as photos depicting Wackenhut Services Inc. control rooms. I have theorized the former Wackenhut Services Inc., or WSI, a DoD contractor and private security firm, operated as a critical piece of UFO Legacy Program operations. Outside of their board of directors that housed several alleged program gatekeepers, such as Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, I have also theorized WSI engaged in UFO crash retrieval or clandestine ISR operations. And these were with Wackenhut trained and staffed Department of Energy Special Response Teams. I highly recommend watching my video on Roderick Castle to learn more there. But back on topic here. Within these thousands of photographs are several series of images depicting secretive areas similar to the infamous Area 51. These include the elusive Area 19, which operated or possibly still does operate as a Sandia operations and maintenance facility. Analyzing incredible images of the ominous quote-unquote areas, we can fully circle back to mention of DARPA running UFO Legacy Programs out of Tonopah Test Range, and observe photos captured by EG&G of Sandia's nuclear weapons testing at the ever-elusive, little-known, and highly secretive Area 6. I would truly be taken aback if many watching this project had actually heard of Area 6. As a matter of fact, this site's operational directive wasn't really spoken about until 2016. When the National Nuclear Security Administration spokesperson, Darwin Morgan, discussed Area 6, a facility that I wager is involved in UFO Legacy Program operations, possibly, just possibly, alongside Dolan Sour's alleged Advanced Group 6. Morgan discussed Area 6 serves as a location for top-secret R&D work located on the Yucca Flat within the Nevada test site. Area 6 has existed since the 1950s, when it featured a dirt airstrip that was reconstructed in 2005. A complex of buildings and at least one large hangar with the overall hangar complex capable of holding 15 or more MQ-9 Reaper drones, and this is of course all above ground. Morgan stated Area 6's top-secret R&D work consisted of sensor testing and UAV or unmanned aerial vehicle testing for partners at the Air Force, Army, Navy, DARPA, and DTRA, aka the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. If DTRA sounds familiar to you, respected whistleblower Dylan Borland just spoke of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency on Weaponized podcast.
Were you what they call an all-source analyst, or is that different?
I did end up doing that for a while when I got to DTRA, which is future and things I found out related to this subject while I was at DTRA.
What's DTRA?
The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and I was under
redacted. According to Morgan, Area 6 does a wide variety of work for these quote-unquote others, as Area 6 contains advanced and sensitive equipment evolved from the nuclear testing program. Morgan stated the Area 6 runway and its apron were built by Bechtel Nevada, the site's management and operations contractor at the time, at a cost of $9.6 million. Bechtel, of course, is one of the most high-profile contractors accused of building deep underground military bases and connective tunnel systems below the continental United States to house clandestine operations and UFO legacy programs. Las Vegas Review-Journal did some digging on how much it costs to run this enigmatic Area 6. And recall for just a moment how the NNSA and their NFO, or Nevada Field Office, run operations at the Nevada test site. From the Las Vegas Review-Journal, quote, "Funding is buried in the Nevada Field Office's Strategic Partner Program, which was part of the $84 million budgeted for the entire security site in the fiscal year 2015. Program funding was about 13.5% of the field office's $662 million total budget that year," end quote. But what else can we learn about Area 6? Because, trust me, there is a lot. And how do we know that Area 6 is managed by Sandia? Let's quickly first address the latter here. For starters, we know that the NNSA runs Area 6, performing special access programs focused on R&D of UAVs, and likely much more in the black budget. As we know, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia are responsible for NNSA clandestine and experimental programs within the Nevada test site. Additionally, Area 6 is roughly 75 miles southeast of the Tonopah Primary Airfield and is quite close to the outer limits of the Tonopah Test Range. And of course, Tonopah Test Range is managed by Sandia. Sandia also has a documented history at Area 6, managing facilities and engaging in experiments, and we have EG&G to thank here. We can observe a series of beautiful photographs taken in 1984, showing Sandia's compound at Area 6 covered in beautiful desert snow, as well as a 1972 Area 6 image now showing the dry lake. These images ultimately reveal nothing but that EG&G had some incredible photographers. From 1974 to 1975, however, we can observe a series of photographs depicting Sandia and DoD control rooms at Area 6. These photos are superb and really make my mind wander if just possibly these control rooms supported UFO Legacy Program operations, perhaps testing on recovered discs from the 40s. I love the eerie feel of the analog equipment and massive instrumentation racks. So what else can we learn about Area 6? Well, let's look to a 2000 report titled, quote, "Yucca Mountain Repository License Application Safety Report," end quote. prepared by the Department of Energy and Bechtel SAIC, and yeah, Bechtel SAIC. This report states Area 6 houses an aerial operations facility. And thanks to a supporting 2004 document by the NNSA and DOE titled, quote, Final Environmental Assessment for Aerial Operations Facility Modifications Nevada Test Site, end quote, we can learn this aerial operations facility was actually established in 2001, 1 year after the founding of NNSA. Quote, the purpose of this facility is to construct, operate, and test a variety of unmanned aerial vehicles. Tests include, but are not limited to, airframe modifications, sensor operation, and onboard computer development, end quote. Indeed, according to the NNSA, the Nevada Test Site Resource Management Plan details Area 6's aerial operations facility as a national security use zone that satisfies extremely strict requirements, such as being, quote, complementary to or compatible with existing missions in the area, and a compelling need, such as security, restricted access, remote location, physical characteristics that drive the project to be located in this zone, end quote. This Aerial Operations Facility, or AOF, a testing area for UAVs, is actually run by, you guessed it, Lockheed Martin. Seen as NNSA spokesperson Morgan said Area 6 satisfies the whims of DARPA, and Area 6 has a strong Sandia presence and an aerial operations facility operated by Lockheed Martin. One has to wonder about possible parallels to Richard Dolan's source that allegedly leaked information from the 2021 classified UAPTF report that detailed exotic projects harnessing non-human technologies operated under the control of DARPA in the Nevada Test and Training Range, specifically Tonopah Test Range. And recall that from 1993 to 2017, Martin Marietta and Lockheed Martin operated Sandia and thus managed operations on the Sandia-run Tonopah Test Range in the same period. One really does have to wonder if Tonopah and Area 6 are prime sites for DOE, NNSA, and DARPA-controlled UFO Legacy Program operations managed by Sandia and Lockheed Martin. And although this theory is not supported, who knows, maybe the Advanced Group 6 hails from Area 6. Again, watch the section in the Lockheed video on Tonopah, then come back to this project to start seeing all these parallels. In the Lockheed project, whilst investigating the Tonopah test range, I discussed how Tonopah Site 4 employees were required to utilize commuter flights from Las Vegas to get to their highly secure location. And this was through the illustrious and mysterious red-striped Janet Airlines that flies employees directly to Area 51 and Tonopah. Janet Airlines is indeed quite real and infamously shuttles employees from Las Vegas to the Nevada test site to extremely top-secret sensitive locations. And so far in my work, we have demonstrated Janet travels to Area 51 and Tonopah, but Janet also travels to Area 6. According to Lazy G Ranch, an excellent website dedicated to exploring Area 51, N20RA, a twin turboprop plane, has been identified as a Janet aircraft used by Area 51. N20RA has been shown to fly in a little-known airport that can't be found on FAA records called NVH-1. NVH-1 is located at the Aerial Operations Facility on Area 6 at the Yucca Dry Lake. Indeed, Lazy G Ranch captured this aircraft flying to NVH-1 at Yucca as recently as 2020. Many mysteries remain regarding Area 6 and Tonopah Test Range, and I strongly believe that the two are intimately connected. The connection here, Lockheed Martin, Sandia National Labs, and UFO Legacy Programs. I do briefly want to speak on DTRA we discussed earlier in relation to Area 6. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency serves as a defense and combat support agency within the Department of Defense for countering weapons of mass destruction and full-scale CBRNE, or chemical, biological, radiological, and high-explosive threats. DTRA also supports the U.S. nuclear enterprise under the NNSA. That also involves DOE FFRDC national labs like Sandia, Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and Lawrence Livermore. DTRA's mission is to, quote, provide cross-cutting solutions to enable the Department of Defense the United States government and international partners to deter strategic attacks against the United States and its allies, prevent, reduce, and counter WMD and emerging threats, and prevail against WMD-armed adversaries in crisis and conflict, end quote. DTRA consists of 2,100 plus employees, over 66% of which are contractors, and operates with an annual budget of roughly $2 billion. Until whistleblower Dylan Borland, I paid little to no attention to DTRA. But when Borland discussed that the agency contained old Atomic Energy Commission UFO files that concluded UFOs were extraterrestrial, I really started to tune in.
When Congress passed the archives legislation where all the agencies were supposed to round up all their documents, I had a wonderful conversation on my last day, and I'm sure it was just coincidental. The person in charge of collecting all of the information from DTRA dealing with extraterrestrials and, as he put it, quote unquote, little green men, happened to sit next to me at my computer terminal and began pulling all of the documents on my system and the systems in our SCIF. Interesting fact for you was that he came into the old Atomic Energy documents from way back when, and there was intelligence and information in those that discuss what you said, which is this has been around with them, and that even back then they had a similar outlook that this isn't exactly for our benefit.
Everywhere we have ventured today, DTRA has sat in the shadows. From DTRA's involvement in possible UFO Legacy Program-related sites on the Nevada National Security site like Area 6, or how DTRA and its precursor entities are involved in DOE, NNSA, and NEST, or maybe how DTRA works closely with the OST and SRT for establishing quote-unquote safe havens, or lastly and most importantly, how DTRA is deeply connected to Sandia. Indeed, DTRA maintains a major presence and involvement in operations at White Sands, the Nevada National Security Site, and Kirtland Air Force Base, which contains Sandia. Sandia and DTRA work closely with the NNSA on projects like global threat reduction. DTRA and its precursor agencies played a tremendous role in U.S. nuclear testing since the days of the Manhattan Project on the Nevada test site and elsewhere. But DTRA's deepest connections with Sandia that relate to our earlier investigations possibly allows us a new lens on early Atomic Energy Commission Sandia base UFO Legacy Program operations. The lineage of DTRA is indeed vast. The modern-day Combat Support Agency is a product of several precursor agencies that began with the Manhattan Project. DTRA was formed in 1998 from its predecessor agency, the Defense Special Weapons Agency, which operated from 1996 to 1998. Itself preceded by the Defense Nuclear Agency from 1971 to 1996, which actually began supporting NEST in 1974. The Defense Nuclear Agency was preceded by the Defense Atomic Support Agency from 1959 to 1971. The DASA was preceded by an organization that ran from 1947 to 1959, the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project. That's right, the same AFSWP that was stationed at Sandia Base with the Los Alamos Sea Division, the same AFSWP that was integral to the early crash retrieval and material exploitation program claims highlighted in the testimony of former New Mexico State Rep. J. Andrew Kissner, and the same AFSWP featured throughout the disputed Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit documents. DTRA serving as the newest evolution of the AFSWP really does put some weight on DTRA's possible involvement in Sandia-connected UFO Legacy Program operations. As does it put weight on Borland's statements that DTRA houses old AEC extraterrestrial records. Now that DTRA is largely on my radar, I even look to previous projects and am gobsmacked at what I see. Take my project on Dugway Proving Ground, for example, where I identified the West Desert Test Center Director Ryan W. Harris as a likely UFO Legacy Program member with a background at Battelle Memorial Institute. Outside of Battelle, Harris, who I believe serves a very senior role at one of the U.S.'s most integral Legacy Program sites, was also a former project engineer for DTRA-sponsored projects. So I'd like to revisit and possibly amend one of my hypotheses that has largely commanded this video. NNSA works with DOE FFRDCs to operate UFO crash retrieval and UFO recovery transportation logistics with OST, NEST, and SRT. Likely involved with all of these agencies and their subordinate commands is likely a support agency that acts under the guise of National Nuclear Security, DITRA. Hey guys, it's Gerb, and if you're still with me to this point, thank you so much for tuning in, and I appreciate you watching and joining me for this deep dive into Sandia National Labs. Now, before I start my end of video rant, let me get one thing out of the way, and that is to thank the excellent Xander Jones for the music today. This is the second video in a row where we have used Xander Jones' incredible music that he produces and makes himself. Xander Jones is the owner, he is the producer, he is the man behind the wheels of the Dreamland Motel channel, so please go check that out as well. Show him some love and support. Xander Jones is super talented. He's awesome. I spent quite a bit of time with him on the 9 September hearings. A really great guy, him and the whole night shift crew, so thank you to Xander. Anyways, as we shift back to talking about Sandia, if this is your first time joining me for a video today, I think this is the perfect example to see how I like to do my investigations, deep dives, and videos. What started what I thought was going to be a rather small video, a rather small investigation on Sandia, blossomed into something enormous. In most of my videos, probably the past 7, 8, 9 videos, and then a few more earlier in my catalog, I talk often about Sandia. This was Sandia being implicated in the IPU documents, just claims of reverse engineering out of Sandia, or sort of the more famous example on my channel with the reverse engineered triangle, specifically TR-3B and Edgar Fouche's claim of TR-3B's propulsion system being reverse engineered out of Sandia and Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. So I thought the approach today was going to be rather straightforward and just kind of recount various ways in which Sandia has been implicated in UFO legacy programs. And then I thought, and I sat back and I really thought, well, if we really want to properly explore Sandia, that means we have to explore the Department of Energy. That means we have to explore the NNSA. That means we have to explore the Nevada test site. That means we have to explore what it means for the Department of Energy to possibly allegedly safeguard UFO and non-human materials with various restricted data and classification methods born out of the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement, and so on. And if we're going to analyze Sandia, we have to analyze the whole history of Sandia. Because Sandia as an FFRDC is a little bit different than taking an approach at a defense industrial base contractor like Lockheed Martin. There's a lot of not only private elements which we have to analyze with Sandia, but also the non-private aspect of the FFRDC as well. And as we see with Department of Energy FFRDCs, there's quite a few strings attached. So let me quit rambling here and let me slow down and let's start to get through things and recap today's video. One of the special things I'm going to do with most of my projects is figure out a way to get my hands on some sort of memento celebrating these investigations, because as you guys know, I don't put something out unless I truly stand behind it and I truly believe in the work I have done. So I guess this is for the last video and today as a little gift for me. Sandia National Labs, Lockheed Martin Challenge Coin for basically to celebrate the Martin Marietta Corporation taking over command of Sandia back in 1993. So this is an incredible challenge coin going on my wall, and I'm so thrilled I now have this. So yeah, as we saw today that FFRDCs and specifically Department of Energy tied FFRDCs have a very close tie-in relationship. You know, the 3 NNSA multi-mission laboratories, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia, and Los Alamos are all intricately entwined, and this even starts with Los Alamos is Z Division. It's pretty much Weapon Ordnance Division, going over to Sandia Base in 1947 and establishing operations there. I find it intriguing that Truman himself asked Western Electric, which again was a subsidiary of American Telephone and Telegraph, the same network you might be calling somebody on later today, who also ran the Bell Lab system, was asked to run the Sandia Corporation and thus Sandia National Labs. The evolution of who is managing Sandia through the Sandia Corporation is extremely interesting. And as we saw, this was Western Electric. This was passed on to Martin Marietta, which merged into Lockheed Martin.
which now to this day is Honeywell. There's always a contractor behind that FFRDC. So pretty early on, Sandia established its prowess in nuclear deterrence, nuclear weapons innovation systems, nuclear weapon payloads, the Stipe rocket, and so on. Sandia was intimately involved with some of the Atomic Energy Commission at the time's most special programs. Remember, Sandia began pretty much the same week as the Trinity nuclear bomb test, so Sandia is intricately tied with elements of the Manhattan Project, and that's why I spent so much time looking at the two. And I've spent so much time of today's video playing clips of Dave Grush's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. If you could listen to that episode 50 times and still find new things. There is so much that David Grush speaks about in that interview that I think really hasn't been talked about enough. And relating to today's video is secrecy for UFO legacy programs being modeled after the Manhattan Project. And Sandia itself is a product, basically full-bred Manhattan Project child. Even with design of its facilities, as we saw more to design with Jason Moore and Max Flatow, who was pretty much the architect supreme of the secret city of Los Alamos, the Manhattan Project. He is then tasked with spearheading much of Sandia at Kirtland and basically SNL&M, Sandia National Lab, New Mexico sites. I think that's a really interesting lead to pursue, is who is building these sites for Sandia. You know, if Sandia is allegedly, which I believe they are, possibly housing craft or non-human materials at these locations, who actually built this for them? And as we see, that's intimately tied into the Manhattan Project. I found J. Andrew Kissner's disclosures extremely interesting. Again, there was a little bit of trepidation when you start with him in 2004 at the second annual Crash Retrieval Conference that Kissner's words are put forth by Linda Moulton Howe, who again, her track record is dubious at best. But I contacted Kissner myself. The first thing he told me after speaking with him a little bit is the truth is stranger than fiction. So because I've actually talked to Kissner and understand that this was a pursuit he took in 1994 to speak to legacy program senior members and legacy program members, ranging all the way from AEC Laboratories like Sandia to the Office of Naval Research, I felt comfortable speaking about his disclosures. I think they tied in quite a bit to some of the stuff we spoke about today. You know, J. Andrew Kissner talked about operations being spearheaded under Vannevar Bush to take on early UFO legacy programs. I think one of the most interesting things of Kissner's disclosures is him talking about custody of UFO materials being transported to custodians back late 40s, early 50s. I can't quite remember exactly when he said. But that is something that comports with my view of FFRDCs. I know I talked about this in relation to Kona Blue, but I don't think contractors per se are the ones who own the hangars that are housing recovered vehicles. I think that's FFRDCs. I think that's the National Labs. I think that is MITRE, and I can't stress that enough. I think that's MITRE, and other FFRDCs because they are semi-private. And thus, federal elements, whether it's a DoD or IC agency that's actually the UFO Legacy Program admin, when FFRDCs have these vehicles in their possession in maybe a hangar, maybe under Chantilly, Virginia, maybe out west in Aerospace Corporation locations in El Segundo, California, that this is the perfect place the governing agency or the federal institution that is administrating the legacy program can keep materials, debris, information about recovered non-human artifacts out of traditional oversight channels. And so that comports with my view of FFRDCs. And then to hear that J. Andrew Kissner's sources, direct legacy program personnel he talked to, again, he's kind of like a mini Dave Grush precursor, directly stated that there was a transfer of custody in the 50s or late 40s to put UFO materials in AEC laboratory hands. That's really interesting to me. And then, of course, we have Al O'Donnell and George Knapp. And Al O'Donnell gave two separate stories. He told Annie Jacobson these were the Roswell crash was a product of Joseph Mengele victims of mangled children. And the saucer was of Joseph Stalin origin. I don't agree with that statement. I think Roswell was indeed a non-human crash, maybe multiple. But Al O'Donnell in the 90s told George Knapp that DoD elements or IC elements recovered a disc of non-human origin and live biologics, and that this craft was housed at Indian Springs Air Force Base until 1954-1955, where it was transferred to an Area 51 auxiliary site, and this involved EG&G, Special Projects, and other institutions. Traditionally, you'd think that this craft was moved to Area 51, adjacent sites, in 1955, because that's officially when Area 51 was established. But I kind of agree with Robert Wood in the sense that there were probably underground installations in that specific area of Groom Lake going back far beyond 1954 that was using an old borax mine for kind of an interior infrastructure. I personally think, same with J. Andrew Kissner, that the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement started to see the shifting of custody of materials of non-human origin into National Lab, into FFRDC hands, as a perfect way for the Atomic Energy Commission and U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community to start keeping these recovered materials out of traditional oversight channels. And so that discussion of the Atomic Energy Commission really gets interesting when we start to talk about the DOE, remember established in 1977 after the AEC went defunct in 1974, and the creation of the NNSA in 2000, and how the NNSA has 3 multi-mission laboratories, Sandia, Lawrence Livermore, and Los Alamos, and the NNSA also utilizes other places like the NNSS and the Y-12 complex, which houses Oak Ridge for national security missions that relate to U.S. nuclear national security and nuclear weapons development. I think that modern day, let me get this out of the way first. I don't think all UFO legacy programs originate from the Department of Energy. But I think quite a few UFO legacy programs can, if they need to, utilize secrecy controls under the Atomic Energy Commission and Department of Energy to obfuscate UFO materials. This is from the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement, and this is to misclassify materials as transclassified foreign nuclear information or hide materials as special nuclear material, or possibly utilize DOE classification foreign intelligence information, specifically non-contract, to be able to hide UFO materials and keep them from contractor or customer hands, essentially. So I know in this video, we talked a lot about the OST, SRT, and NEST, the Nuclear Emergency Support Team, the Special Response Team, and the Office of Secure Transportation, which are 3 NNSA commands that are deeply involved in Sandia, all 3 of them, and how these 3 institutions may be kind of an enforcement arm of the Department of Energy and NNSA for CONUS, Continental United States UFO Legacy Program logistics missions. I mean, when I say logistics missions, I mean the transportation of recovered UFOs, maybe across subterranean facilities to other places, and I mean sort of like a Continental United States mission-oriented team. I don't think these 3 elements, SRT, OST, and NEST, are direct action per se. I think that SRT is a federal protective service that likely is a protective unit for OST, Office of Secure Transportation, and their vehicles, and NEST. I think a good example of us seeing sort of how that might work, even though I don't think the on-site direct action team is SRT, is the crash encounter testimony of Jonathan Weygandt. It is really interesting to see how these 3 elements might work in conjunction with each other with the NNSA and Sandia involvement, because remember, whether it's NEST being comprised of contractors like EG&G, Sandia, Raytheon, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, or the OST utilizing actually Sandia-constructed vehicles, or a Federal Protective Service SRT team existing at Sandia and some of its locations. These 3 all work intimately. So I think that's a very valuable pursuit to start to explore, sort of the NNSA's sub-agencies, which already the NNSA is a semi-autonomous agency in the DOE, and how those might play into UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering logistics, not just recovery. For outside of continental United States recovery, I think NEST still might be involved, just because that's the CBRNE team of choice to kind of secure a site, but I do think that may be more of a rapid reaction, direct action team, whether that be former JSOC elements, a parallel Tier 1 team, 24th STS. I think that's more likely the kind of armed team on site for crash retrievals, and I don't necessarily think the Office of Secure Transportation is providing vehicles, 18-wheelers down in Peru or something. I generally think that is probably the 160th SOAR A Company, 1st Battalion. That is what I think there. So we took an interesting look at the Nevada test site today. Of course, the Nevada test site is now the NNSS. And how about Area 6, the Aerial Operations Facility? Isn't that interesting? The selection of 20,000 images from Sandia and EG&G/the NTS Photo Lab was a gold mine to find. Of course, so many of those images are just parts. I went through all 20,000, and at the time I was editing this video, even more got added up to 2012. When I was doing my research for this video and putting together the project, I had 1972 to 1992, so I thought, oh, okay, great. Well, this sort of selection shows Sandia up until Martin Marietta took over Sandia in 1993, so we got a great 20 years to work with. But no, more got added on, so there's going to be more to look through. Whether it be Area 6, Area 19, other installations, there's a ton of interesting photos, some beautiful photographs. Area 6 is an installation I think is very worthy, should I say, of further investigation. Of course, the aerial operation facility is run by Lockheed Martin up there. There's an airfield that Janet Airlines flies to, and as we know, Janet flies to, Tonopah Test Range and Area 51. So what sort of clandestine operations are going on down there? Are there linkages between Area 6 and the Tonopah Test Range? As we know, the alleged source that leaked information from the alleged 2021 UAP Task Force report to Richard Dolan talked about DARPA-led programs out of the Nevada Test and Training Range, utilizing reverse-engineered exotic technology of extraterrestrial origin for RDT&E of some very, very advanced aerospace platforms. As we see, Area 6 is not only an aerial operations facility for UAVs, but it also satisfies the whims of numerous government customers, including DARPA. Now, this video is coming out at the time I made a tweet about the DARPA Security and Intelligence Directorate, the DARPA SID. And I mentioned that in this video. I think it's important to mention again, the DARPA SID, I think, is the direct program protection for UFO legacy programs in DARPA. And I myself have a tremendous amount of apprehension and, to be quite honest, fear for DARPA SID. But Advanced Group 6 possibly being stationed at Area 6 in Tonopah Test Range, still not much to go on there. I still would like to explore that more in the future, but still pretty interesting. I also found it interesting that Area 6 does work for DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, that basically stemmed from the AFSWP, which kind of evolved alongside Sandia at Sandia Base in 1947. And we know from the clip from the weaponized second episode with Dylan Borland spoke about that when he was working at DTRA, the terminals at which he was physically located had old Atomic Energy Commission files on UFOs housed in DTRA that actually came to conclusion UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin. I don't think he himself looked at those files, but that is very interesting, especially the evolution of DTRA from the AFSWP. And again, that correlates back to the testimony of J. Andrew Kissner and the IPU documents, which talked about an AFSWP Colonel Hausbrook, who was really good friends with Leslie Groves, the Manhattan Project, being an on-site individual for the Roswell crash. So many interesting connections here, guys. So many interesting connections. I think that this video was a ton of different little information packets that can all be woven together and a ton of interesting things to derive from there. If you only take a single thing away from this video, a single thing, it's not about Sandia, but know that the Department of Energy has its own intelligence agency. You'll see it called different things: DOE-IN, DOE-INT, as I personally like to call it, OICI, Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. And if my sources or individuals that I've spoken to with information regarding Oak Ridge are indeed correct, the OICI directly runs legacy program operations at least one Department of Energy, FFRDC, that's involved with the NSE, the Nuclear Security Enterprise, the NNSA, and the Y-12 complex, and that is, of course, Oak Ridge. Maybe someday I'll have more information on that. As I stated, that sort of testimony should still be taken with conjecture, because I do not have specific evidence for that, and the individual who has made those claims is still undergoing a very lengthy vetting process. However, the information is still intriguing, and I do think there is some substance there. So again, guys, Sandia, from 1949 or 1947, if you want to argue semantics up until today, Sandia is one of the experts of U.S. nuclear security and nuclear weapons development, and a location that I think is integral to UFO legacy programs. There is so much to cover and so much more that I couldn't even talk about today, but I thought this was a thorough package. And with that, I'll wrap up my rant. That being said, guys, thanks again so much for joining me. The channel is at this point almost 97,000 viewers. I am humbled and I am honored that you guys have tuned in to watch my channel. It truly means more than anything. What started off as a fun project for me has turned into a platform where a lot of people look to me to provide some pretty concrete investigations and to study this subject. And I take that with extreme responsibility, guys. That's why I don't really engage in like drama or kind of do so many podcasts or anything. I want to talk when I feel like I have something interesting to say. And that's why I make these videos so long. I really don't want to cut corners. I really want to try and nitpick at everything, investigate everything. So thank you so much. All your support means the world to me. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. That all helps the channel out so much. And I always say I have a Patreon. I don't gatekeep content. The content you see on YouTube and the stuff I post, I think my voice cracked. The content you see on YouTube and the stuff I post on Twitter, I don't gatekeep stuff. So the Patreon is to support what you think the channel is worth. And again, guys, thank you so much. Please remember to like and subscribe. As soon as I post this video, the next project will be in development. I have some interesting things coming down the pipe, maybe some interviews as well. I don't know if the interviews will be traditional interviews or interviews more my style that are more documentary style. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you all on the next episode. Thank you very much, and bye.